Tonight we enter a museum storeroom where a clay fragment rests beneath controlled light and careful silence. It is not beautiful in the way gold is beautiful. Its surface is brown, uneven, and crossed by wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay thousands of years ago. Yet those shallow impressions preserve an idea more unsettling than any royal treasure. They speak of existence before the familiar gods had taken their places. Archaeologists recovered many such tablets from the ruined cities of southern Mesopotamia during the 19th and 20th centuries. Scholars at institutions including the University of Pennsylvania, Yale University, and Oxford University later studied their signs, grammar, and damaged edges. Their work revealed that Sumerian scribes were not merely recording taxes, grain deliveries, or temple offerings. Some tablets attempted something far more ambitious. They described the beginning of order itself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You may also share your location and local time in the comments. There is something strangely fitting about listeners across the modern world gathering beneath different skies to hear a story written before most recorded history. You stand, in your imagination, beside a tray lined with soft archival material. The room carries the faint scent of dust, paper, and old wood. Beyond the walls, traffic moves through a modern city. Inside, the tablet remains still. Its stillness is deceptive. The Sumerians lived in the southern lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Their cities rose from flat plains where heat shimmered above canals and reeds whispered beside muddy banks. Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur became places of temples, workshops, legal agreements, songs, and careful administration. Records confirm that writing first developed there largely for practical accounting. Barley had to be measured, sheep had to be counted, workers had to receive rations. Humanity invented paperwork almost immediately. Yet the same system used to track jars and livestock eventually carried prayers, laments, myths, and cosmic speculation. A reed stylus could record 10 baskets of grain in the morning, then describe the origins of heaven by evening. The instrument did not change. Only the question became larger. The tablet before you belongs to that larger world of questions. Its exact wording survives imperfectly because clay breaks, signs fade, and excavations often separate fragments from their original context. Scholars debate how certain early lines should be restored. Some read them as descriptions of creation. Others believe they belong to temple poetry or later scribal exercises preserving older traditions. The disagreement matters. Sumerian texts rarely offer a single, neat account of the beginning. There is no surviving volume titled The Complete Creation of Everything. Instead, there are fragments scattered across hymns, myths, royal compositions, and instructional tablets. One text begins with heaven and earth united. Another speaks of primeval water. Another assumes that divine generations already exist. The ancient scribes seem less interested in one fixed sequence than modern readers might prefer. You feel the roughness of the tablet through the thin barrier of imagination. Each sign appears deliberate, but the spaces between them feel equally important. A broken corner may have held a name. A missing line may have described an action. Silence enters the document wherever the clay has vanished, and silence is where the mystery begins. The central suggestion is not simply that gods created the world, it is that something existed before the gods known from later temples and royal inscriptions, before Enlil ruled the wind, before Inanna crossed the heavens, before Enki governed the deep waters of wisdom. There may have been a condition without established divine offices. The cosmos had not yet become a kingdom. This does not necessarily mean there were no sacred beings at all. Sumerian thought often presents divine families through generations, with older powers giving rise to younger ones. Some deities appear less like personalities and more like vast conditions of nature: sky, earth, water, darkness, fertility, and air become difficult to separate from the beings associated with them. Perhaps the earliest gods were not rulers. Perhaps they were from environments. Your mind drifts across the ancient plain before cities interrupted the horizon. There are no brick walls, no temple platforms, and no smoke rising from cooking fires. The rivers have not been disciplined into irrigation channels. Water spreads through marshland, reflecting a pale and empty sky. Insects hum among reeds. Mud settles slowly beneath warm, shallow currents. No priest speaks a name. No king raises a monument. The absence feels almost peaceful. Mainstream scholarship places the development of Sumerian literary traditions within the growth of temple schools, particularly during the late 3rd and early 2nd millennia before the Common Era. Students copied established compositions to master difficult signs and vocabulary. Many surviving myths come from these educational settings, especially tablets associated with Nippur, a major religious and intellectual centre. A curious detail appears in some school texts. Student scribes occasionally complained about strict teachers, long lessons, and punishment for poor handwriting. The young people preserving cosmic mysteries were also worried about arriving late. Eternity, it seems, still had classroom discipline. Within these schools, ancient stories could survive for centuries. A composition might be copied long after the political world that produced it had disappeared. Names of forgotten cities remained. Obscure gods continued to receive lines. Ideas older than current dynasties passed quietly beneath the stylus. This makes the tablet more than a religious statement. It becomes a vessel of inherited memory. Still, an open scholarly question remains. Were these creation traditions understood literally by their audiences, or were they poetic frameworks used during ritual and education? Researchers continue to compare vocabulary, tablet order, and regional differences. The surviving evidence allows several interpretations, none completely secure. You are left with careful uncertainty. The Sumerians did not look backward into an empty past. I imagine layers. Before cities came divine decisions. Before divine decisions came older powers. Before those powers, there may have been water, darkness, or an undivided mass where heaven and earth had not yet separated. The clay does not shout this revelation, it barely murmurs. That quietness gives it strength. Under museum light, every wedge-shaped impression casts a tiny shadow. The shadows gather inside the signs, making the writing appear deeper than it truly is. You begin to understand why these fragments attract such fascination. They preserve not only answers, but the shape of ancient uncertainty. A civilization famous for building the first great cities also imagined a time before building. A culture devoted to temples preserved memories of existence before temples. People who served powerful gods copied stories suggesting that even those gods belonged to a sequence. They had beginnings too. The thought settles gently, like dust upon clay, beyond the glass. The modern world continues without noticing. Yet inside this small fragment, creation has not fully started. The gods have not received their names. Humanity has not entered the fields. The sky has not risen away from the earth. Everything waits, and in that waiting the oldest mystery begins to breathe. For a moment, it feels as though the room itself has lost its ceiling. You are no longer standing beneath museum lights. You are beneath a sky that has not yet become a sky. There is no clear horizon, no sun rising through mist, and no moon measuring the passing night. Above you, there is only a vastness without its shape. Beneath you, there is no firm ground. The ancient Sumerian imagination often begins with separation. Heaven and earth do not always appear as independent realms from the start. They are sometimes presented as joined together, pressed into one another, forming a single cosmic body. Only later are they divided, allowing air, distance, weather, and life to occupy the space between them. This is not creation from absolute nothingness. This is creation from closeness. You sense pressure everywhere. The world is not empty, but compressed. There is no room for mountains, rivers, birds, people, or divine palaces. Everything that might exist remains trapped within an undivided whole. The silence is not peaceful now, it is heavy. Oxford scholars studying Sumerian creation traditions have noted that several surviving compositions assume the existence of heaven and earth without describing their origin. This leaves an important uncertainty. The earliest storytellers may have believed these realms were eternal. They may also have inherited older accounts that were already lost when the surviving tablets were written. The clay preserves a doorway, not the entire room. A familiar Sumerian expression describes heaven and earth as a paired totality. Together they represent the ordered universe. Their union contains everything. While their separation makes ordinary existence possible, once distance opens between them, the world gains structure. You hear no thunder. You hear no command. Instead, the change appears almost natural, like two surfaces slowly pulling apart. This calm transformation differs from later stories in which creation follows violent conflict. In some Babylonian traditions, the cosmos emerges after a divine battle. A defeated primeval being becomes the material of the ordered world. Sumerian fragments often feel quieter. Forces divide, generations appear, responsibilities settle into place. The universe becomes organized rather than conquered. Your feet seek ground, but the ground is still forming. It feels soft, damp, and uncertain, as though the earth has not decided whether to become soil or remain water. Somewhere beyond sight, something lifts. The weight above you begins to recede. Ancient observers lived beneath enormous skies. Southern Mesopotamia offered few mountains to interrupt the view. The land stretched outward in flat expanses, while the heavens seemed to curve over fields and marshes. Storms could appear from great distances. Dust clouds approached like walls. Stars shone with extraordinary clarity during dry nights. It's easy to understand why sky and earth became more than scenery. They were the boundaries of existence. A council hymn from ancient Mesopotamia presents major gods as powers responsible for maintaining these boundaries. Divine authority is tied to location. One deity belongs to the heights, another to wind, another to fresh water below the earth. The structure resembles an administration written across nature. Even the cosmos had departments. The image carries gentle humour, yet it reveals something about Sumerian thought. Order meant assigned responsibility, canals required supervisors, temples required officials, cities required rulers. The universe, by the same logic, required divine offices. Yet such offices could only exist after the realms themselves became distinct. This raises a subtle question still discussed by historians of religion. Did social organization inspire the Sumerian vision of divine government, or did sacred stories provide a model for human institutions? The evidence moves in both directions. Temples shaped civic life, while civic life shaped the language used for the gods. You cannot easily separate one from the other. The scent of wet clay rises around you. It is rich, mineral, and strangely clean. A dim grey light enters the widening space. The sky is not blue yet. The earth is not green. There are no fields waiting for barley. There is only distance. Distance changes everything. Once heaven stands above and earth rests below, movement becomes possible, rain can fall, smoke can rise, birds can travel. Light can pass through open air, a person can look upward and imagine a world beyond reach. The Sumerians gave this middle space particular importance. Air was not merely emptiness, it was an active force associated with authority, breath, weather, and command. In several traditions, the god connected with air plays a central role in separating heaven from earth. This may sound like a simple explanation of nature, but it carries deeper meaning. Separation is both physical and political. One power lifts the sky, another stabilizes the ground. The universe becomes a territory with borders. The first border is vertical. Above belongs to one realm, below belongs to another. Human life will eventually occupy the narrow band between them. A quirky strand of Mesopotamian belief imagined the heavens as layered rather than endless. Different levels could belong to different divine beings. Precious stones, metals, or shining materials were sometimes associated with these upper regions. The sky was not an empty blue distance. It was architecture on a scale no builder could copy. You imagined stairways that do not touch the ground, gates open in darkness. Silent courts extend beyond the stars. None of these places are visible, yet their order reflects the same desire found in earthly cities. Everything must have a place. Records from temple archives confirm that boundaries carried sacred importance. Fields were measured carefully, canals were marked, property lines were recorded. Boundary stones could invoke divine punishment against anyone who moved them. To disturb a border was to disturb order itself. The separation of heaven and earth therefore becomes more than an ancient attempt to explain the landscape. It becomes the first act of definition. One thing is no longer another. Space acquires meaning through division. Perhaps this is why the image feels so enduring. Every human life begins in a world already divided. There is inside and outside, land and water, light and dark, home and wilderness. The Sumerian vision pushes these contrasts back toward the beginning of reality. You feel cold air moving across your face. It is the first breeze in a universe that has only recently gained room for wind. The sound is low and continuous. It passes through empty distance without meeting walls, truss, or human ears. No one names it. The absence of naming is important. In many ancient traditions, to name something is to establish its identity and power. Here, the world exists in a condition not yet fully defined. Heaven may have separated from earth, but the sacred hierarchy remains incomplete. The space is ready. The rulers are not. This is where the central mystery deepens. If heaven and earth can exist before the familiar gods receive their roles, then the cosmos is not simply their creation. They inherit it. They emerge within a structure that is older than their authority. Such an idea does not remove divinity from the story. It places divinity inside a longer timeline. Perhaps that the oldest sacred powers were the realms themselves. Perhaps heaven and earth were not places governed by gods, but living presences later transformed into personalities. Scholars continue to debate whether early divine names began as poetic descriptions, local cult titles, or personifications of natural forces. The signs do not settle the matter. You remain beneath the widening sky. Its height now feels immeasurable. The earth grows firmer under your feet. Though it remains bare and silent, a faint line appears at the horizon. The universe has shape, but no histories. No king has ruled. No temple has opened. No prayer has risen. Yet the first great division has taken place, and existence now has room to unfold. Heaven waits above. Earth rests below. Between them lies an empty world where every later story will eventually begin. Your mind drifts toward water before it finds any shore. There is no riverbank beneath your hand, no reed bed, and no mud wall rising nearby. The water extends without interruption, dark and patient, carrying no reflection because no settled light has reached it. Its surface barely moves, yet something beneath it feels awake. Sumerian tradition often places fresh water below the visible world. This hidden reservoir was not imagined as a simple underground lake. It was a deep source of fertility, wisdom, craft, and life. Wells opened toward it, springs revealed it, rivers seemed to carry its power into fields and cities. To those living in southern Mesopotamia, water was never merely scenery. It was survival arranged into channels. The land could be generous, but only when water arrived in the proper place. Too little brought hunger, too much broke banks, drowned fields, and shifted boundaries. Irrigation required constant labour, shared planning, and arguments between neighbours who all believed their barley deserved special consideration. Human nature was already thriving. Archaeological work across ancient settlements confirms that canal systems supported dense communities in regions where rainfall alone could not sustain large harvests. Researchers from the University of Chicago and other major institutions have studied ancient waterways, soil layers, and settlement patterns across the southern plain. Their findings show that water management shaped politics, labour, and survival from the earliest periods of urban growth. The sacred stories reflect this dependence. Primeval water appears not as a decoration around creation, but as one of its oldest conditions. It exists beneath ordered life, beneath the temples, and beneath the authority of younger divine powers. It carries possibility before that possibility has taken visible form. You lower your fingers toward the surface. The water feels cool. It has no taste of salt, no sharp mineral bitterness, and no smell of decay. It carries the clean scent of deep earth, sealed stone, and rain remembered by darkness. The sensation is soothing, though the depth below remains impossible to measure. This hidden freshwater realm became closely associated with a wise divine figure known for craft, cleverness, ritual knowledge, and creative solutions. He is often presented as a master of the deep, a keeper of plans, and a protector who solves problems through intelligence rather than force. His world is not a bright palace above the clouds. It is a silent domain below. That placement matters. Knowledge, in this tradition, does not always descend from the sky. It rises from depth. Wisdom comes from hidden places, from water moving under soil, from secrets held beneath ordinary sight. A temple inscription proves how seriously ancient communities treated these unseen waters. Sacred buildings were sometimes described as resting upon the deep, as though their foundations touched a primeval source below the earth. The temple therefore connected three regions at once: the sky above, the human city around it, and the ancient water beneath. You imagine stepping into such a sanctuary at dawn. The floor is cool under your feet. Oil lamps breathe faint smoke against plastered walls. Somewhere in an inner chamber, water has been poured into a stone basin. The sound is small, but the room seems to deepen around it. A single drop becomes a memory of creation. Priests used water for purification, ritual preparation, and symbolic renewal. Clean water could mark the boundary between ordinary activity and sacred attention. It washed hands, vessels, statues, and spaces. The act was practical, but it also carried the suggestion that order must be restored repeatedly. Dust returns. So does disorder. This may explain why primeval water remains both comforting and unsettling. It contains life, yet it also exists before stable boundaries. It is older than fields and walls. It cannot be governed completely. A curious fringe idea sometimes claims that ancient descriptions of the deep preserve memories of catastrophic floods or lost coastal landscapes. Such theories often move beyond available evidence, but they draw attention to something genuine. Early communities lived in environments transformed by shifting rivers, marshes, and rising waters. The landscape itself could erase roads, homes, and whole districts. A city might survive for generations, then the river could choose differently. This was not fantasy. Sediment layers found at several Mesopotamian sites show episodes of flooding, though they occurred at different times and do not prove a single universal disaster. Scholars continue to debate how local flood memories influence later stories of overwhelming waters and divine judgment. The question remains open because myths do not behave like simple reports. They gather memory, fear, ritual, and imagination into one vessel. You listen closely. Far below the surface, the water carries a faint vibration. It could be the movement of underground springs. It could be stone settling in darkness. It could be nothing more than your mind giving sound to depth. Yet ancient listeners may have imagined the deep as inhabited. Not crowded, perhaps, but alive with powers older than ordinary worship. Some beings in Mesopotamian tradition belong to hidden regions beneath the earth. Others guard thresholds, secrets, or sacred knowledge. Their identities shift across periods and cities, making any fixed system difficult to reconstruct. This uncertainty is part of the atmosphere. The oldest traditions were not written by one author in one room. They grew across generations, temples and local customs. A deity honoured in one city could appear differently elsewhere. One text might emphasise water as a source of creation. Another might present it as a domain already ruled by a divine intelligence. Both visions could survive. Sumerian religion did not always demand perfect consistency. That may sound untidy to a modern reader, but it resembles the natural world they knew. Of course, rivers branch in, return, disappear, and cut new paths. Water refuses straight lines unless someone forces it between banks. Even then it negotiates. Your palm rests against damp clay. The material is soft enough to receive marks, yet firm enough to hold them. Every tablet begins with water mixed into earth. The writing surface itself joins two ancient elements. A scribe needs clay beside a canal. He removes stones and presses the lump flat. Then he records a story about the deep. The connection is almost too elegant, though perhaps no one comments upon it. The substance preserving the myth is born from the same waters the myth remembers. Researchers at Yale University have examined how scribal education preserved religious vocabulary that was already old or obscure. Students copied lists of signs, divine names, professions, animals, plants, and places. Through repetition, they inherited a mental map of the universe. Water occupied many positions within that map. It flowed through agriculture, purification, medicine, birth, burial, travel, and trade. It appeared in blessings and curses. It carried boats, reeds, fish, silt, and disease. No single meaning could contain it. The primeval deep, therefore, remains difficult to define. Is it a place? Is it a divine substance? Is it a memory of ancient marshland? Perhaps it is all three. The surface around you begins to ripple. No wind touches it. The movement comes from below, spreading outward in slow circles. Each ring grows wider, then softens into darkness. Something is beginning but not yet emerging. The water holds its shape. It does not divide. It does not speak. Still, the possibility of life gathers within it. Seeds, rivers, bodies, and cities remain distant. But their first condition is present. Moisture waits to enter soil. Wisdom waits to rise from depth. Creation waits for water to become more than stillness. You feel no fear, only a quiet awareness of scale. The oldest foundation may not be the stone. It may be water without shore, resting beneath everything that later believes itself permanent. The darkness around you is not the darkness of night. Night belongs to a world with a sun, a horizon, and creatures waiting for morning. This darkness has none of those things. It is not the shadow cast by an object. It is the absence of objects themselves. You move without seeing. There is no path beneath you, yet you do not fall. There is no wind, yet the silence seems to press gently against your skin. The air has no scent of rain, smoke, or vegetation. Nothing has burned, nothing has bloomed. The ancient Sumerians imagined creation through states of order and disorder, rather than through empty space alone. Their surviving texts often assume that matter, place, or sacred power already exists. What changes is arrangement, realms separate, names appear, duties are assigned, and a recognizable universe slowly takes form. The world becomes real by becoming organized. Before that organization, there is a condition difficult to describe. The scribes had words for darkness, night, shadow, and hiddenness, but no surviving composition gives a complete portrait of absolute non-existence. Their language reaches toward the beginning, then encounters broken clay and missing lines. Your ears search for something familiar. There are no sandals scraping over the brick, no insects pulse beside a canal, no cattle shift behind reed fencing. Even the tiny sounds of human presence are absent, because no human body has entered this place. Silence is the only witness. Yet even that phrase may be misleading. A witness must remember what happened. Here, there is no observer, no memory, and no record being made. Events may occur, but nothing stands apart from them to say that they occurred. This creates a quiet philosophical difficulty. Can there be a beginning before anyone can recognize it? The Sumerian scribes rarely present such questions in abstract language. Instead, they use images. A city has not been built. A shrine has not been established. Grain does not grow. Sheepfolds do not exist. These absences communicate the condition more effectively than a formal definition. You understand the void through missing work. No wall has been raised. No bread has been baked. No offering has been placed before a statue. A mainstream historical fact helps explain this way of thinking. Sumerian cities depended upon continuous human labour. Archaeological excavations reveal canals, storage rooms, workshops, ovens, courtyards, and administrative buildings arranged around collective activity. Order was something people produced every day. Without labour, a city did not simply become the quiet. It began to disappear. Mud brick walls cracked in heat and dissolved under rain. Canals filled with silt. Weeds entered courtyards. Roofs collapsed when wooden beams weakened. The ancient environment taught a simple lesson. Structure survived only through constant attention. The cosmic darkness reflects that lesson on an enormous scale. Nothing is maintained because nothing has received a roles. There are no divine inspectors measuring fields, no sacred guardians watching gates, and no heavenly scribes recording decrees. The familiar machinery of the universe has not begun. For a moment, the absence feels strangely restful. No one owes taxes. Even paradise has practical advantages. The humour fades as you consider what else is missing. There is no music, affection, hunger, grief, curiosity, or fear. Those experiences require bodies and time. Without change, there is no expectation. Without expectation, there can be no surprise. Darkness is not cruel, it is indifferent. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Oxford University, and Yale University have examined how Sumerian myths used lists of absences to describe primordial conditions. The technique appears in several Mesopotamian compositions. A text may explain that certain cities, animals, crops, tools, or social customs had not yet come into being. The absence of ordinary things makes the ancient setting understandable. A listener knows what bread is. Therefore, a world without bread feels incomplete. This style also reveals something about the people preserving the stories. Creation was not only the appearance of mountains or stars, it included baskets, ploughs, weaving, shepherding, brewing, and legal order. Civilization itself belonged to the sacred structure of existence. The universe was unfinished until daily life became possible. You stretch out your hand. The darkness offers no surface. Your fingers close around nothing. Although even nothing feels too definite. There is no cold stone, no warm soil, and no rough timber. Touch has no purpose when there is nothing separate from you. The sensation becomes unsettling, but gently so. You are not threatened. You are unnecessary. A quirky modern theory claims that ancient descriptions of primeval darkness preserve memories of volcanic ash clouds or immense storms that temporarily hid the sun. Such ideas remain speculative and lack direct evidence in Sumerian texts. Still, they reflect a human instinct to connect myth with remembered disaster. Ancient communities certainly experienced dust storms capable of darkening the sky. Dense clouds could turn daylight into a reddish twilight. Thunderstorms rolled across the plain with remarkable force. For a brief time, the ordered world could seem to vanish. A farmer might lose sight of his own field. A traveller might hear only wind. Perhaps that those experiences gave emotional weight to stories of cosmic darkness. Yet the mythic condition is greater than weather. A storm passes through a world already made. This darkness exists where no world has settled into shape. The difference is enormous. An open scholarly debate concerns whether these descriptions reflect theology, poetry, ritual performance, or some mixture of all three. Researchers disagree about how ancient audiences understood them. A priest reciting such lines during ceremony may have heard meanings different from those heard by a student copying them in school. The same words can serve many rooms. In a temple, darkness may suggest sacred mystery. In a classroom, it may preserve difficult vocabulary. In a royal setting, it may emphasize that order depends upon divine and human authority. No single interpretation closes the question. You begin to notice a faint texture inside the silence. It is not sound exactly. It resembles the expectation of sound, the slight tension before a drum is struck or a door is opened. Something could happen here. That possibility changes the dateness. The void is no longer merely empty. It becomes a chamber holding unrealized forms: sky, soil, water, breath, and living bodies remain absent. Yet their absence begins to feel temporary. The first movement may not be light. It may be distinction. One region becomes separate from another. One force receives a name. One presence becomes capable of acting. Creation starts when sameness breaks. This idea appears across many ancient traditions, though each culture expresses it differently. In Sumerian thought, separation, naming, and assigning functions often carry more importance than sudden invention. Reality emerges as relationships become clear, above and below, wild and cultivated, sacred and ordinary, human and divine. None of these distinctions exist in the darkness surrounding you. There is no boundary to cross. There is no forbidden place. There is no home. The absence of boundaries sounds like freedom, but freedom requires choices. Here, no choice can be made because no alternatives exist. The unformed condition contains every possibility and allows none of them to pierce. You feel the strange weight of that paradox. Everything may be present as potential. Nothing is present as itself. The darkness continues without measure. Time has not been divided into days, months, or reigns. No king has numbered his years. No scribe has dated a tablet. Duration passes, perhaps, but there is no event by which to count it. The moment could last forever. Then something changes. Not visibly, not loudly. A difference enters the stillness, so slight that you cannot name it. The darkness remains, but it no longer feels complete. Somewhere beyond a perception, a hidden condition begins to turn toward form. There is still no witness, yet the silence seems to be waiting. A faint warmth gathers beneath your feet. The surface is neither stone nor soil, but something between them, soft enough to receive pressure and firm enough to resist the water below. You feel it through the soles of your feet as a slow, patient change. The earth is learning to hold its shape. No grass covers it. No seed waits inside it. There are no roots, insects, or buried bones. The ground has not yet become a landscape. It is only substance, rising into form without roads, borders, or cultivated fields. In Sumerian thought, Earth was not merely the stage where creation unfolded. It could be understood as a living, sacred presence, Joined to fertility, birth, and the material world, the land-nourished cities received the dead and carried the weight of temples built from its own clay. Every wall returned to earth eventually. Every king did too. You crouch and press your palm against the surface. It feels cool beneath the warmth above. Fine grains cling to your skin, though they have not yet become dust. The ground is raw and silent, untouched by ploughs or sandals. There is no difference between wilderness and farmland because neither category exists. That distinction will matter greatly to the people of Mesopotamia. Yes. Their survival depends upon transforming difficult terrain into ordered fields. Marshes must be drained or crossed. Canals must be cut. Soil must be watered carefully. Salt must be watched. Because too much irrigation can leave bitter crystals behind. Agriculture is never effortless there. Archaeological studies of southern Mesopotamia show that early farming communities adapted to an unstable environment shaped by river movement, seasonal flooding, and gradual changes in soil quality. Settlements grew where water could be managed. Yet those same systems demanded maintenance across generations. The cultivated world was an achievement. That is why Sumerian stories treat tools, canals, grain, and livestock as sacred gifts rather than ordinary possessions. A field of barley represents more than food. It represents victory over uncertainty. You can almost see that future field, rows of green stretch beneath the sun. Workers bend with sickles, baskets fill, donkeys carry grain towards storage rooms. A scribe waits beside measured heaps, ready to record what everyone else has gathered. At the moment, none of it exists. The plain around you remains blank. A low ridge begins to rise in the distance. It does not become a mountain. Southern Mesopotamia is a land of broad horizons, and true mountains belong far beyond its alluvial plain. Yet even a slight elevation feels important in a world without features. Your eyes follow the ridge as it curves through the dim light. Water gathers beside it, forming a shallow basin. The first natural boundary has appeared. One surface is higher, another is lower. The land begins to possess character. Sumerian texts sometimes describe creation through the establishment of useful conditions. The earth becomes meaningful when it can support grain, cities, animals, and human labour. A landscape without these functions is not necessarily evil, but it remains incomplete. This reflects a practical worldview. Ancient people did not encounter nature as untouched beauty viewed from safety. They met it as heat, floodwater, mud, disease, hunger, and difficult distance. Beauty existed, certainly, but it was tied closely to usefulness and survival. Shade was beautiful. Fresh water was beautiful. A secure granary was especially beautiful. One unusual tradition imagines that crops and useful plants were not always available to humanity. They belonged first to a distant divine realm or mountain region. Only through sacred action did they enter the human world. The idea sounds strange until you remember how miraculous agriculture may have appeared. A dry seed disappears into dark soil. Months later, it returns multiplied. The transformation feels ordinary only because humanity has watched it for thousands of years. To the ancient imagination, grain carries mystery. You pick up a handful of bare earth. It slips slowly between your fingers. There is no organic richness within it. No trace of old leaves or decayed roots. Fertile soil usually contains the remains of earlier life. This soil has no earlier life. It is earth without memory. The thought feels almost impossible. Every field known to humanity stands upon older seasons. Every forest rises from generations of fallen growth. Even deserts preserve shells, pollen, and forgotten riverbeds. Here, the ground contains no history. It waits to receive one. A debate among scholars concerns how literally the Sumerians imagined the earliest landscape. Some researchers read these passages as mythic descriptions of cosmic beginnings. Others see them as symbolic reflections of land reclamation, when marsh or wasteland became productive through organized labor. Both readings may hold part of the truth. A community watching canals transform dry ground could understand creation as something repeated locally. Each new field was a small beginning. Each repaired waterway restored order. Each settlement raised from mud repeated the work of the gods. Creation was not finished once. It had to be maintained. The scent around you changes. A faint mineral sharpness rises from the surface, followed by the smell of moisture meeting warm earth. It resembles the first breath of rain upon a dry road, though no cloud has formed above. You inhale slowly. The land seems closer now. Its scent no longer feels empty, it feels expectant. Small cracks appear across the surface as heat touches moisture. They spread in branching patterns, making the earth look like a tablet covered in signs no scribe has written. Each line divides one piece from another, yet the pieces remain joined beneath. Nature invents its own script. There is still nothing to read. A quirky interpretation once suggested that ancient creation accounts might preserve distant memories of changing shorelines around the Persian Gulf. During earlier periods, lower sea levels exposed large areas that later disappeared beneath the rising water. Some researchers have explored whether human communities occupied those vanished landscapes. The possibility is intriguing, though direct connections to particular Sumerian myths remain uncertain. Stories can preserve environmental memories, but they also reshape them beyond recognition. A lost plain may become a sacred world. A flood may become divine judgment. A fertile valley may become the birthplace of humanity. The land beneath you continues to settle. Shallow channels form naturally as water seeks lower ground. They twist without design, branching and rejoining across the plain. Their paths resemble veins spreading through a body. No engineer directs them. No worker clears them. The earth and water are negotiating alone. In later Sumerian cities, canal digging becomes a symbol of royal responsibility. Kings boast of opening waterways, restoring fields, and feeding their people. Such claims are political, but they also echo sacred order. A ruler proves legitimacy by making the land productive. Power is measured in harvest. A crown cannot be eaten. You walk toward the low ridge. The ground becomes firmer with each step. Your footprints remain behind you, the first temporary marks upon an otherwise untouched surface. They look strangely intimate. A footprint says that a body passed here. It creates a tiny history, yet when you turn, the marks are already softening as moisture rises around their edges. The earth does not preserve you for long. Nothing has yet been built to resist erasure. No fired brick lies beneath the surface. No grave cuts into the soil. No foundation stone carries a ruler's name. The land has not been claimed, measured, inherited, or disputed. Ownership has not entered the world. This may be the strangest absence of all. Ancient Mesopotamian records contain countless arguments over fields, canals, boundaries, and harvest shares. Land supported families, temples, officials, and rulers. To control earth was to control survival. Here, the ground belongs to no one. Perhaps it belongs to itself. The idea feels peaceful, but the peace cannot last. Once life appears, the earth will become nourishment, territory, workplace, sanctuary, and grave. It will hold every human achievement and every human quarrel. For now it remains unformed. The low ridge stands quietly beneath a pale sky. Water gathers in its shadow. Fine dust begins to lift where the surface dries, moving in a thin veil across the plain. The land has gained texture. It has gained direction. It has not gained purpose. That purpose waits in seeds not yet planted, cities not yet imagined, and footsteps not yet taken. The earth lies open beneath you, ancient and unfinished, holding every future field inside its silence. A softer presence gathers where the land meets the dark water. You do not see a face, a throne, or a crown. There is only a sense of nearness, like someone standing just beyond the reach of sight. The air grows warmer, the silence changes. It no longer feels Ancient Sumerian traditions sometimes place a maternal power near the beginning of existence. Her identity is difficult to fix because divine names shift across cities, periods, and compositions. In one tradition, she appears as the mother of the gods. In another, she is linked with the earth, birth, mountains, or the shaping of living bodies. She is not always a single, clearly defined figure. She is a cluster of memories. You feel the ground beneath you pulse with a slow rhythm. It is not an earthquake. The movement is too gentle, more like breath passing through buried chambers. Each rise presses warmth upward through the soil. The ancient imagination often joined motherhood with landscape. Earth received seed, concealed growth, and brought life into light. Mountains could resemble immense bodies rising from the horizon. Springs emerged from hidden depths. Caves opened like entrances into older worlds. Creation was understood through familiar mysteries. A child forms unseen. A seed breaks open underground. Milk appears within the body. These processes required no royal decree. They unfolded quietly, hidden from ordinary sight, and their secrecy gave them sacred weight. Records from ancient temples confirm that several major goddesses received titles connected with motherhood and creation. Some were called Great Mothers, Mistresses of Birth, or Ladies of the Mountain. Their temples employed priests, administrators, musicians, brewers, textile workers, and labourers. A divine mother could govern an institution as complex as any palace. She was not simply gentle. She held authority over life itself. You walk toward a low rise where the soil is darkened. The scent of wet clay grows stronger, mixed with something faintly sweet, like crushed herbs warming beneath sunlight. There are no plants nearby, yet the fragrance lingers. A figure begins to form in your mind. She may be seated upon the earth. She may be standing within it. Her hands are broad, marked with clay, and her face remains indistinct. The lack of detail makes her feel older, not younger. Personality belongs to later. Presence comes first. Scholars from Oxford University and the University of Chicago have examined how divine identities merged and separated across Mesopotamian history. A goddess worshipped under one name could absorb titles from another. Local traditions overlapped when cities traded, fought, intermarried, or came under shared rule. This creates difficulty for modern interpretation. The earliest mother may not have been one goddess at all. She may represent several local powers remembered through similar language. One city saw her in the fertile earth. Another imagined her in the stony highlands. Another honoured her as the skilled maker of human bodies. The clay tablets preserve these traditions side by side without explaining their differences. Ancient readers may not have needed an explanation. They lived in a world where a person could hold several titles and social roles. A woman might be a mother, priestess, landholder, brewer, and member of a powerful household. A god could also possess many names without losing identity. Divinity did not require simplicity. A curious detail appears in some Mesopotamian birth rituals. Small clay objects, protective figures, and spoken formulas could be used to guard mother and child during labour. Birth was dangerous, unpredictable, and surrounded by sacred attention. The Divine Mother therefore carried comfort and fear together. She gave life, but she also governed the narrow passage where life could fail. The story remains suitable for quiet telling because it does not need violence. Its tension comes from uncertainty. A body waits. A breath has not begun. Hands hover over clay. Will the form live? No one can know until it moves. You kneel beside the darkened soil and touch it. The clay is smooth, almost oily, and holds the impression of your fingers. It feels ready to become something else. This quality made clay a natural material for imagining creation. It could be shaped into vessels, bricks, figurines, tablets, and seals. It came from riverbanks and returned to the earth when abandoned. Clay was humble. Clay was everywhere. Clay could remember a hand for thousands of years. Some Sumerian and later Mesopotamian accounts describe human beings as formed from clay, sometimes mixed with a divine substance. The details differ, but the underlying image remains powerful. Humanity is neither purely sacred nor merely soil. You are made from both. Perhaps that is why people are capable of building temples while also needing sleep, bread, and shelter. The divine spark may look upward, the clay body always remembers the ground. An open scholarly debate concerns whether the mother goddess originally held a more central position in early religion than she did in later state traditions. Some researchers argue that changes in political authority elevated certain male gods. Others caution that the surviving evidence is too uneven to support a simple decline. The question cannot be settled neatly. Temples dedicated to powerful goddesses continued for centuries. Women also held significant religious offices in several cities, yet the most influential surviving myths often place male gods in commanding roles. The balance shifts from text to text. You hear a low humming in the distance. Could be a ritual song carried across an unseen courtyard. Could be wind passing through a doorway that has not been built. The tone rises and falls without words. Music often accompanied temple ceremonies. Harps, lyres, drums, and human voices helped shape sacred space. A repeated melody could calm, summon, mourn, or praise. Sound gave form to what could not be seen. The humming seems to cator around the hidden mother. She does not speak. Her silence is not weakness. It resembles concentration. A vessel takes shape slowly under practiced hands. The potter presses inward, lifts the walls, wets the surface, and corrects each uneven edge. Too much pressure collapses the form. Too little leaves it weak. Creation requires restraint. This image fits the maternal power better than a sudden command. She works close to matter. She understands weight, moisture, and fragility. She does not create from a distant throne. She touches what she makes. Prestigious university researchers studying ancient craft traditions have shown how deeply specialized labor shaped urban life. Potters, metalworkers, weavers, and builders developed knowledge passed through families and workshops. Skill depended upon repetition, timing, and careful observation. The gods were often imagined as masters of such skills. Divine creation resembled expert. That detail brings the mother closer to human life. She is not merely a symbol of fertility, she is an artisan. Her body may generate life, but her hands also design it. A strange fringe interpretation claims that ancient descriptions of divine shaping preserve memories of advanced biological knowledge. Such claims exceed the evidence and transform poetic language into modern speculation. The tablets do not describe laboratories, machines, or scientific procedures. Still, the old image remains fascinating without such additions. A being shapes humanity from earth. Breath enters matter. Awareness appears where none existed. The mystery needs no machinery. You watch the clay in your hands. A small ridge forms beneath your thumb, then another. The shape is accidental, yet it begins to resemble a shoulder or bent knee. Your mind supplies meaning quickly. That tendency may explain how ancient figurines gained power. A few pressed lines could suggest eyes, arms, or a pregnant body. The object did not need perfect realism. Its purpose was symbolic, ritual, or protective. Some figurines have been found in homes, graves, and sacred spaces. Their exact meanings remain debated. They may represent deities, worshippers, ancestors, protective beings, or ordinary people. Small objects carry large uncertainties. The maternal presence seems to withdraw into the earth, not disappearing exactly, but becoming inseparable from the ground beneath you. The warmth remains. You begin to understand why she is difficult to name. A name creates a boundary. This power resists boundaries. She is soil and womb, mountain and workshop, Nourishment and danger. She stands near the beginning because she represents the transformation of hidden possibility into visible life. No crown is required. No army follows her. Her authority lies in emergence. The dark water rests beside the land. The clay waits under your hands. The humming fades into the warm air, leaving only the steady pulse beneath the ground. Something is preparing to be born. Whether it is a god, a world, or the first fragile body remains uncertain. The mother keeps her silence. A pale glow gathers where the sky reaches the edge of sight. It does not arrive like sunrise. No golden disk appears, and no shadow retreats across the ground. Instead, the light seems to awaken inside the air itself, spreading slowly through the stillness. With it comes the sense of company. The first sacred generations do not enter as strangers crossing a threshold. They seem to unfold from the oldest conditions of existence, each presence emerging from another, each name carrying a relationship. The divine world begins as a family. This matters because the familiar gods of Mesopotamia were rarely imagined as isolated beings. They belonged to lineages. They had parents, children, siblings, partners, advisors, servants, and rivals. Their authority rested partly upon inherited place within a sacred household. The heavens resemble an enormous court. Every figure knows where to stand. You sense movement above the plane. Shapes gather in the dimness, but they remain too distant for clear faces. One seems vast and elevated, another carries the density of earth, a third moves through open space like a pressure felt before wind. They do not appear fully formed. They acquire distinction gradually. Ancient god lists preserve traces of this ordering. Scribes arrange divine names according to families, cities, professions, temples, and ranks. These lists were not myths in the usual sense. They were scholarly tools, copied by students who needed to understand how the sacred world was organized. A tablet could function almost like a map of divine society. Researchers at Yale University and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these lists to reconstruct changes in religious traditions. They reveal that some gods rose in prominence while others faded, merged, or survived only as names preserved through scribal habit. The divine family was never completely stable. Political power changed it. When one city became dominant, its patron deity often gained greater status. Priests and royal scribes could place that god higher within the cosmic order. Genealogies helped explain the change by giving the newly prominent figure an honourable ancestry. Even eternity required respectable relatives. The joke carries a quiet truth. Human societies often justify authority through descent, and Mesopotamian theology reflects the same instinct. A god connected to ancient powers appeared legitimate. A ruler favoured by such a god gained sacred support. You listen as the first names begin to pass through the air. They are not spoken loudly. Each arrives like a breath shaped into sound. The moment a name settles, the surrounding space seems to change. A presence becomes recognizable. A role begins to form. In many ancient cultures, names were more than convenient labels. They could express nature, status, destiny, or function. To know a true name was to understand something essential about the being who carried it. The earliest divine generations therefore emerged through identity as much as birth. One power belongs to height, another belongs to depth, another belongs to the living space between them. The relationships create structure. Parent and child are not merely personal connections, they explain how one cosmic condition develops from another. Sky gives rise to atmosphere. Earth produces growth. Water warriors hidden wisdom. Such stories turn observation into genealogy. A mainstream historical fact appears in the religious centre of Nippur, where the god of air and authority held exceptional prestige. Excavations and inscriptions show that rulers from many cities sought recognition through his temple, even when they worshipped different local patrons. His importance was not simply meteorological. He represented legitimate order. A king might control armies and fields, but divine approval made that rule appear part of the universe itself. Temple hymns could describe authority as something granted from above, placed into the ruler's hands through sacred decision. The cosmic family therefore shaped politics on Earth. You feel a breeze move across the plain. It is light, carrying no dust, yet it changes the temperature against your skin. The invisible movement suggests a being whose presence is known through effect rather than appearance. Air cannot be held. Still, it moves everything. The same is true of authority. A decree is only sound until people obey it. A title is only a word until institutions support it. Ancient theology understood this connection intuitively. Divine speech could establish order because the sacred household stood behind it. The first generations gain power through recognition. One being acknowledges another. A role is accepted, accepted. A boundary receives a guardian. The world grows more crowded, but not yet noisy. A curious fringe tradition, preserved in later interpretations, imagines the oldest gods as memories of vanished rulers or foreign visitors. Such theories appeal to those seeking historical individuals behind every divine figure. The evidence, however, points more strongly toward gradual religious development shaped by nature, city identity, ritual, and political change. The gods are not simple disguises. They are layered creations. So I was going to just delete that layered creation. A storm deity may carry memories of weather, royal power, local tradition, and inherited poetry at once. A mother goddess may combine fertility, craft, landscape, and dynastic protection. Divine identity grows through centuries of retelling. This complexity makes the earliest generations difficult to arrange. Some tablets offer one lineage, other compositions suggest another. Names can shift position depending upon the city or purpose of the text. Scholars continue to debate whether these differences represent competing theologies, regional traditions, or flexible storytelling accepted without concern. The ancient scribes rarely pause to apologize for inconsistency. They simply continue. You may find that oddly comforting. The people who catalogued grain with remarkable precision allowed their gods to remain complicated. Sacred reality did not need to behave like a perfect administrative record. Perhaps mystery was part of its authority. The pale glow strengthens. Several distant forms now stand apart from one another. They seem immense. Though scale is difficult in a world without buildings, one figure appears near the height of heaven, another remains close to the ground. Between them, smaller lights gather. These are not steps. They feel like younger presences waiting to receive their places. Divine generations introduce time into the sacred world. A parent exists earlier than a child. An older power carries memory. A younger power may inherit responsibility, challenge authority, or establish a different order. The gods therefore possess history. They are not outside sequence, they participate in it. This idea gives ancient myth much of its emotional force. Sacred beings can fear replacement, defend rank, seek recognition, and remember injury. Their immortality does not free them from family tension. A divine banquet may resemble a royal feast. A divine argument may resemble a household dispute with more alarming weather. The humorous resemblance makes the gods understandable. They are vast, but their relationships remain familiar. Parents worry, children compete, councils disagree, promises create obligations. The cosmos becomes personal. You hear the soft chime of metal, though no instrument is visible. It resembles ornaments, touching as someone moves through a quiet chamber. The sound passes from one unseen figure to another. Clothing, crowns, staffs, and jewelry later become signs of divine status in art. Cylinder seals and reliefs show gods wearing horned headgear, seated upon thrones or receiving worshippers. Such images helped viewers recognize rank. No surviving image can show the first emergence itself. Art begins when conventions already exist. The scene around you belongs to an earlier imagination, where identity remains fluid. The sacred beings are still becoming recognizable. Their symbols have not yet hardened into tradition. A star will belong to one. A horned crown will mark another. A flowing stream may announce a lord of deep water. For now, the signs wait. Prestigious research institutions have shown that Mesopotamian religion developed through exchange among cities rather than through one central authority. Trade routes carried goods, but they also carried stories, hymns, rituals, and divine names. A traveling merchant might enter a foreign temple and recognize familiar powers under unfamiliar titles. A priest could adopt a respected tradition from another city. A conqueror might honor local gods to stabilize rule. The sacred family expanded through contact. It could absorb new members without abandoning old ones. That flexibility helped the system endure across changing kingdoms and languages. Divine identities adapted while preserving an appearance of ancient continuity. The gods always seemed old. Their arrangements often were not. An open scholarly question concerns how much ordinary people understood of elaborate divine genealogies. Temple specialists copied complex lists, but a farmer or brewer may have known mainly the gods connected to home, work, health, and local festivals. Religion existed at several levels. The scholar memorized cosmic descent. The household lit a lamp and asked for protection. Both participated in the same sacred world, though they entered through different doors. You watch the younger light settle across the growing heavens. None dominates completely. The family remains a collection of possibilities rather than a finished government. Some will govern cities govern cities. Some will guard crafts. Some will move through dreams, childbirth, illness, justice, love, and death. Their future roles wait inside their names. The first generations stand silently beneath the pale light, joined by descent and divided by identity. They have not created every condition around them. They inherit a world already carrying depth, matter, distance, and hidden potential. Their power is real. Their antiquity is not absolute. That quiet distinction remains at the center of the mystery. The gods emerge within existence, and existence does not depend entirely upon their arrival. The sacred family has begun to gather. The oldest silence now contains voices. The air changes first. A steady current moves across the silent plain, carrying fine grains of dust into long, pale ribbons. Above you, the heavens seem higher than before. Below, the ground feels heavier, more settled, as though each realm has finally accepted its place. The separation is no longer a moment. It is a condition. Ancient Sumerian tradition often describes the division of heaven and earth as one of the defining acts of cosmic order. The paired realms begin close together, joined so completely that ordinary life has no room to exist. A divine power associated with air then creates distance between them. That distance becomes the human world. You stand inside the opening. The sensation is strange. The sky rises beyond reach, while the earth presses firmly beneath your feet. Between them stretches a wide chamber of wind, light, weather, sound, and movement. Existence now has space to breathe. The Sumerians did not imagine the heavens as an empty backdrop. The upper realm possessed structure, rank, and sacred meaning. It could hold divine courts, decrees, stars, and powers whose decisions shaped the land below. Earth carried a different weight. It held clay, rivers, crops, settlements, graves, and the difficult business of staying alive. The two realms belonged together, but they were no longer identical. Their separation created relationship. Rain could descend, smoke could rise, prayers could travel upward, at least in the hopeful imagination of those sending them. A mainstream historical fact appears in the great temple traditions of southern Mesopotamia. Monumental sanctuaries were often raised upon platforms. lifting sacred buildings above surrounding houses and streets. Over time, these elevated complexes developed into enormous step structures. Their height was practical, symbolic, and political. A temple stood closer to the sky. It also stood above the neighborhood, which rarely harmed the reputation of its administrators. Archaeological work at ancient cities such as Uruk and Nippur confirms that sacred architecture dominated the urban landscape. Mud brick platforms required immense labour, careful planning, and repeated repair. Their scale made divine authority visible from a considerable distance. The temple became a meeting point between realms. Its foundations belonged to earth. Its upper rooms approached heaven. You imagine standing at the base of such a structure during early morning? The bricks are cool in shadow. A stairway rises before you, broad and severe. Priests, workers, officials, and servants move along its surface, and every step upward changes the view. Roofs fall below. Canals become lines. Fields spread toward the horizon. The ordinary world grows smaller as the sacred building rises. This architectural instinct echoes the cosmic division. Height becomes associated with authority, distance, and divine perspective. The ruler below may govern a city, but the gods are imagined above the dust, noise, and crowded courtyards. Even divine beings apparently prefer a better view. The cosmic opening also creates weather. Clouds gather. In the middle region, winds move across fields, storms arrive from the horizon with darkness beneath them. Rain falls through the space where heaven and earth no longer touch. For agricultural communities, this middle realm carries both hope and danger. A gentle rain can soften fields. A violent storm can flatten crops and break roofs. Weather proves that separation does not mean isolation. The heavens continue to influence the earth. Lightning becomes a sudden bridge of fire. Thunder gives the upper realm a voice. Rain carries fertility downward, while incense and prayer rise in return. The exchange is never equal. Humans ask much. The sky answers selectively. Scholars at Oxford University and Yale University have studied how Sumerian hymns connect natural forces with divine authority. Wind, storm, sunlight, and celestial order are not described as separate from religion. They are woven into the language of kingship, protection, judgment, and fertility. Nature becomes political. A powerful wind can symbolize command. A stable sky can suggest peace. A destructive storm can resemble an angry ruler who has misplaced his patience. The separation of realms also creates direction. Upward and downward now carry moral, emotional, and sacred meaning. People lift their hands when praying. They bow toward the ground. They bury the dead below. They imagine divine counsels above. The body participates in cosmic geography. You feel this instinct without explanation. Looking upward produces a sense of distance and possibility. Looking downward brings attention to weight, mortality, and the earth that receives every footprint. No tablet needs to teach the feeling. The posture comes naturally. A quirky idea found in later speculation claims that stepped temples were intended as landing places for visitors from the sky. Archaeological evidence offers no support for that interpretation. These structures functioned as religious centres, economic institutions, ceremonial monuments, and symbols of civic identity. Their real purpose is already remarkable. Entire communities organised labour to raise mountains from mud. Southern Mesopotamia had few natural elevations. Builders created artificial height through countless bricks, each shaped by hand from clay and straw. The result transformed a flat horizon into a sacred landscape. The city made its own mountain. That act carried deep meaning. Mountains often appeared in Mesopotamian imagination as distant, powerful, and mysterious places. They offered stone, timber, metals, dangerous roads, and foreign peoples. A raised temple brought the idea of sacred height into the plain. The gods received an elevated home, humans received a staircase. An open scholarly debate concerns how ordinary inhabitants experience these towering complexes. Some researchers emphasize religious devotion, others highlight taxation, labor obligations, elite control, and economic administration. The temple was both sacred and institutional. It housed ritual specialists, but it also managed land, goods, workers, and storage. A worshipper could approach with genuine reverence while also remembering that temple officials expected deliveries on time. Faith and accounting shared a courtyard. The cosmic division mirrors this practical duality. Heaven represents sacred authority, while earth carries production, labour, and mortality. The space between them allows communication, but it also preserves hierarchies. The gods remain distant enough to command respect. Humans remain close enough to the soil to keep working. You walk beneath a widening blue light. The sky now possesses colour, though the sun remains veiled behind a thin haze. Dust passes around your ankles. The ground has dried enough to produce a faint crunch beneath each step. Sound behaves differently in the open to space. A clap would travel. A song could rise. A shouted warning might cross a field. Distance turns sound into communication. The first people who eventually settle this landscape will depend upon voices carried through air. Workers call across canals, merchants bargain in courtyards, priests sing from temple platforms, mothers summon children before darkness. Every sound uses the space created by separation. So does every bird. You notice a small shadow moving overhead. Though no creature can yet be clearly seen, it glides across the pale ground and disappears. The possibility of flight has entered the world. Flight belongs neither entirely to earth nor heaven. It occupies the middle region, touching both without possessing either. Birds later become messengers, omens, food, symbols, and companions of the marshes. Their movement makes the sky visible. Without something crossing it, distance is difficult to measure. A bird turns empty space into a path. The Sumerian cosmos often appears as a system of connected levels rather than a collection of sealed worlds. Waters lie below. Earth supports human life. Air carries weather and breath. Heaven holds divine authority and celestial signs. Each region has its character. Each depends upon the others. The system feels orderly but not peaceful. Boundaries can be crossed, storms descend, floodwaters rise, dreams carry messages. The dead move below. Cosmic order does not eliminate uncertainty. It gives uncertainty channels. Prestigious research institutions have shown that ancient Mesopotamian scholars observed the sky with extraordinary care. They recorded celestial patterns, eclipses, planetary movements, and unusual events. Their work would later support sophisticated traditions of astronomy and omen interpretation. The heavens became readable. A strange light might signal danger. A regular cycle could reassure. The sky was not silent decoration, it was a text written across darkness. You look upward and imagine stars arranged like impressed signs upon a vast tablet. Their positions remain steady enough to guide travellers and mark seasons, yet they also wander, vanish, return, and occasionally behave in troubling ways. The heavens seem ordered. They also seem alive. This tension suited Mesopotamian thought. The cosmos possessed structure, but structure required attention. Priests watched signs, kings maintained rituals, farmers watched clouds. Everyone lived beneath a realm capable of changing their fate. No one ignored the sky for long. The distance above you now feels complete. Heaven has risen beyond ordinary reach. Earth rests below, firm enough for roads, houses, fields, and graves. Between them, the world waits. The separation has created more than space. It has created direction, hierarchy, weather, communication, architecture, and longing. Humans will look upward because something has moved away. They will build higher because distance invites pursuit. They will pray because the realms remain connected, though never comfortably close. The wind passes over the plain once more. Cool against your face, dust lifts, turns, and settles. Above, the heavens keep their height. Below, the earth keeps its weight. You remain between them, inside the first great interval, where mortal history will eventually begin. A sound forms in the still air, delicate at first, then steady enough to hold attention. It is not thunder, wind, or worm. It is a voice shaping one careful word. The moment the sound is completed, something in the landscape changes. A boundary becomes clearer. A presence becomes distinct. A thing that merely existed now seems to possess identity. For the Sumerians, names could carry unusual power. A name did more than separate one object from another. It could reveal nature, establish purpose, grant status, and place a being within the order of the cosmos. To name was to define. To define was to control. You feel this instinct in ordinary life. An unknown sound in darkness creates unease. Once you identify it as a loose shutter, the fear weakens. The object has not changed, but your relationship to it has. A name draws uncertainty into a smaller space. Ancient Mesopotamian rulers understood this very well. Kings placed their names upon bricks, statues, foundation deposits, weapons, gates, and temple walls. The inscription announced more than ownership. It declared that the ruler had acted, built, restored, conquered, or received divine favour. A structure without a royal name could still stand. A named structure entered history. Archaeological excavations have uncovered countless bricks stamped with royal inscriptions. Many carry short formulas identifying the king, his titles, the god he served, and the building he repaired. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Chicago have studied these repeated texts across palaces and temples. The repetition was intentional. One brick might be hidden inside a wall. Thousands created permanence. A ruler understood that his body would vanish, but his name could remain pressed into baked clay. It might survive fire, abandonment, conquest, and the occasional careless excavator. Immortality had become a construction material. The sacred world followed a similar principle. Divine names carried attributes, histories, places, and relationships. A god might possess several names, each revealing a different role. One title could emphasize wisdom, another could evoke storms, another could connect the same being with a particular city. Names around accumulated like ceremony clothing. Each one altered how the god was approached. You hear another word cross the open plain. The sound is low, but the soil beneath you tightens. A stretch of ground becomes a field rather than unmarked earth. The change appears subtle, yet a field has obligations. It can be measured, watered, inherited, harvested, taxed, stolen, blessed, or neglected. Once named, it enters a network of expectation. The same happens to rivers. A channel without a name is simply moving water. A named river becomes a route, boundary, source of livelihood, and subject of memory. People tell stories about its floods, cities depend upon its branches, rulers boast of controlling its course. Language gives the landscape a social life. Sumerian scribes helped maintain that life through lists. They copied names of trees, animals, spoons, professions, cities, tools, stars, gods, and body parts. These lists trained memory, sharpened writing skills, and organized knowledge into categories. A student might spend hours copying signs for objects already familiar. The exercise seems dull until you recognize its ambition. The world could be arranged through writing. Prestigious university researchers have examined these lexical lists as evidence of early intellectual systems. The scribes were not merely learning vocabulary, They were building connections among language, occupation, religion, and administration. A sign could belong to several words. A word could carry several meanings. Context became a form of judgment. This complexity gave trained scribes considerable authority. Most people could not read the dense wedge-shaped script fluently. Those who could possessed access to contracts, royal decrees, temple accounts, medical instructions, hymns, and omens. Literacy opened doors. It also guarded them. You imagine a small school courtyard near a temple. A teacher sits with a tablet resting across his knees. Students hold damp clay and wait for dictation. The teacher speaks a word. The students press signs. A mistake is scraped away and smoothed with a thumb. The clay forgives briefly, but not forever. Once dried or fired, the error becomes stubborn. Education has always enjoyed such little cruelties. A quirky detail survives from ancient school compositions in which students describe strict instructors, poor handwriting, and punishment for speaking out of turn. The young scribes were being prepared to preserve divine names, royal history, and economic records. They were also trying not to be struck for an untidy sign. The contrast feels wonderfully human. Cosmic order may sound grand, but it often depends upon tired students copying lists correctly. In sacred stories, naming could establish destiny. When a deity assigned a name, role, or title, the act placed another being within a hierarchy. A power without a fixed function remained uncertain. Once named, it became responsible for something. Wind gained a master. Grain gained a protector. Justice gained a divine guardian. The system grew through language. You hear many names now, passing through the air like low bells. Each sound settles somewhere different. One attaches itself to a star. Another rests upon a spring. Another enters a doorway that has not yet been built. The world begins to feel inhabited by meaning. This process raises an open scholarly debate. Historians continue to question whether divine names began mainly as descriptions of natural forces, titles of local sacred powers, or inherited words whose earliest meanings were already forgotten. The evidence rarely gives one answer. A name may begin as a place, later it becomes a god. Centuries later, scribes explain it through a new story. Language changes while claiming continuity. That pattern appears throughout Mesopotamian religion. A deity worshipped in one city could be identified with another elsewhere. Priests might explain that two names referred to one power, or that one god was a form of another. Such identifications helped create larger religious systems. They also created magnificent fusion. A modern reader often wants one fixed family tree and one reliable list. The tablets respond with overlapping traditions, regional variations, damaged lines, and names that refuse to remain in their assigned boxes. The sacred world behaves like history itself. It resists neat shelves. You feel the vibration of another spoken word. This time, the sky above seems to acquire a deeper colour. It is no longer simply height. It becomes a realm with character, authority, and memory. The act does not manufacture the sky. It interprets it. That distinction matters. Ancient naming was not always imagined as creating matter from nothing. It created relationship. A thing became understandable, useful, sacred, dangerous, or forbidden. Names guided behaviour. A name disease could be treated through ritual or medicine. A named demon could be addressed through protective formulas. A named boundary could be defended through law. A named ancestor could receive offerings. The unknown became manageable once language reached it, sometimes only partly. The oldest names could also inspire fear. Speaking certain words at the wrong time might invite unwanted attention. Protective traditions often treated language as an active force. A formula had to be pronounced correctly by the proper person within the proper ritual setting. Words were tools. Like tools, they could be misused. A council decree from Mesopotamian history shows how formal language created reality within society. Land grants, legal judgments, marriages, debts, and obligations became enforceable through spoken and written declaration. The decision existed because recognized authority named it. A person became debtor, witness, spouse, heir, servant, or official through words accepted by others. Identity was not merely personal, it was recorded and confirmed. The gods were imagined through similar patterns of decree. A divine assembly could decide fate. A ruling power could assign duties. The spoken decision entered the structure of the universe. Perhaps this reflects the world of temples and palaces, where announcements shaped lives. Perhaps sacred models taught human institutions how authority should sound. The direction remains uncertain. You notice symbols beginning to gather around the distant divine forms. A flowing stream marks one figure. A radiant star marks another. A measuring rod suggests order. A horned crown announces rank. These signs function like visual names. They allow recognition without speech. Art historians studying cylinder seals and carved reliefs have shown how such attributes helped ancient viewers identify gods within crowded scenes. A worshipper could recognize a divine figure by posture, clothing, animal companion, or sacred object. The image became readable. The universe gained a vocabulary of forms. Your own name rises quietly in your thoughts. It carries family choices, cultural memory, expectation, and perhaps a story about why it was given. Others use it to call you, praise you, blame you, remember you, or place you within a record. The sound is ordinary because you have heard it so often. Still, it gathers your life into a few syllables. The ancient scribes understood that strange compression. A name could hold a city, a god, a ruler, or a destiny. Pressed into clay, it could travel farther than the voice that first spoke it. The air around you now feels crowded with such marks. Nothing remains entirely anonymous. The sky has titles. The earth has boundaries. The waters have guardian. The divine family has rank. The shapeless world is becoming a system because language has entered it. Yet one mystery remains. Who pronounced the earliest name? A name requires a speaker, but the first speaker must already possess identity. The thought turned in a circle, calm and unresolved. Perhaps language begins with the gods. Perhaps the gods begin with language. The tablets do not close the circle. They simply preserve the sound. The first shrine is not yet standing. There is no doorway marked with sacred symbols, no courtyard swept clean at dawn, and no lamp burning beside a divine image. The gods possess names and powers, but they do not yet possess houses. They exist without architecture. You move across an open plain where no wall interrupts the horizon. The air carries dust and dry mineral scents. Somewhere far away, water glimmers beneath a pale sky, but no procession approaches it. Nothing has been consecrated. This absence matters because Mesopotamian religion later places extraordinary importance upon the divine household. A temple is not merely a gathering place for worshippers. It is the residence of a god, complete with rooms, furnishings, kitchens, storage areas, workers, estates, and ritual schedules. A powerful deity requires a proper address. Without one, sacred presence remains unsettled. You imagine a god standing above the plain, vast and unmistakable. Yet without a roof or chamber, there is nowhere to place offerings. There is no platform for a statue. No priest knows where to enter. Divinity exists, but worship has no center. The thought feels strangely incomplete. Mainstream archaeological evidence shows that sacred buildings appeared very early in the growth of southern Mesopotamian settlements. Excavations at places such as Eridu and Uruk uncovered successive temple structures, rebuilt upon the same locations across long periods. One sanctuary could rise over the remains of another. Each rebuilding preserved place while changing form. Researchers from the University of Chicago The University of Pennsylvania and Oxford University have studied how these structures developed from modest shrines into large institutional complexes. Their work shows that temples became central to urban identity, labour, storage, administration, and ritual life. Religion occupied space created authority. A temple visible above surrounding houses announced that the god of the city was present and properly maintained. Its height, walls, and controlled entrances separated sacred activity from ordinary movement. The god had a house, therefore, the city had order, yet the earliest divine beings in myth do not always begin inside such houses. They may exist in sky, earth, water, wind, or distant sacred regions before any human builder shapes clay into walls. Their authority precedes construction. Their cult does not. You step across the ground that will one day hold a sanctuary. The soil is compact and dry. There is no foundation trench, no deposit hidden beneath a corner, and no inscription naming a king. Only open land. A warm breeze moves over it, carrying the faint smell of reeds. The emptiness allows you to see what temples eventually change. Once a sacred building appears, movement acquires direction, paths lead toward it, gates control approach, courtyards gather people, inner rooms restrict access. Architecture teaches behaviour. You may stand here. You may not enter there. You may bring food to this threshold. You may speak only at the proper time. A sanctuary turns invisible hierarchy into brick and timber. The gods gain privacy. The people gain rules. This arrangement reflects broader Mesopotamian society. Palaces, large households, and temples all depended upon controlled spaces. Different rooms served different functions. Storerooms protected grain. Workshops organised labour. Reception halls displayed authority. The divine house resembled an earthly institution because worshippers understood power through familiar structures. A god had servants. A god received meals. A god wore clothing and jewellery. A god travelled during festivals. The language sounds almost domestic, though the scale was immense. Temple records confirm that offerings could include bread, beer, meat, dates, oil, incense, textiles, and precious objects. These were not casual gifts placed without order. They followed schedules, measurements, and ritual procedures. Someone had to bake. Someone had to count. Someone had to record what had been offered and what remained. Even eternal beings inspired substantial paperwork. The gentle absurdity hides an important truth. Worship created employment. Sacred institutions supported cooks, brewers, herders, gardeners, musicians, cleaners, guards, craftsmen, scribes, and administrators. The gods entered daily life through labour. You hear, in your imagination, a temple kitchen during early morning. Clay ovens radiate heat. Dough is shaped by practised hands. Beer jars stand nearby. Servants move quickly through narrow rooms. The divine meal must be ready. No one wishes to explain a late breakfast to a storm god. A quirky detail from Mesopotamian ritual concerns the care given to divine statues. These images could be washed, dressed, perfumed, adorned, fed, and carried in procession. The statue was not treated as simple decoration. It served as the god's earthly presence. Through ceremony, crafted material became sacred embodiment. Wood, stone, metal, and cloth entered a new category. The image belonged neither entirely to human manufacture nor entirely to divine mystery. It stood between them. This raises a deep question about the period without temples. Where does a god reside before a statue? Shrine or sacred city offers a fixed location. The answer varies across texts. Some deities belong naturally to cosmic regions. A sky god resides above. A water god inhabits the deep. A storm god moves through air. Their dwelling is not built. Others become strongly tied to particular cities. Their identity and temples seem inseparable. A local goddess may be difficult to imagine apart from her sanctuary. A city god may carry the city's fortunes, boundaries, and political memory within his name. Divine geography becomes urban geography. Scholars continue to debate whether local gods began as personifications of places, protective ancestors, natural powers, or independent sacred beings later attached to cities. The evidence remains too varied for one explanation. A deity can gather several origins. Centuries of worship blur them together. You cross the imaginary foundation of a future inner chamber. The air feels cooler there, though no walls stand around you. Perhaps your mind supplies the sensation because enclosed sacred rooms are expected to feel different. Darkness often increases reverence. Restricted access increases it further. In many temples, ordinary worshippers may not have entered the deepest sanctuary. Priests and high officials handled the most intimate rituals. The god remained present but partially hidden. Distance created holiness. A divine being without a temple lacks that controlled distance. The god is everywhere in the landscape, but nowhere available for formal approach. There is no queue. There is no ceremony. There is no official who can tell you that the inner chamber is closed. The simplicity feels almost rebellious. Still, cities require concentration. People need a place to gather offerings, organize festivals, preserve traditions, and declare collective identity. A temple gives sacred power a visible center. It also gives rulers an opportunity. Kings repeatedly claim to build, restore, enlarge, or purify divine houses. Such work demonstrates piety, wealth, labor control, and political legitimacy at once. A ruler who repairs the god's home presents himself as caretaker of cosmic orders. Brick becomes propaganda. Devotion and reputation rise together. A council decree from later Mesopotamian history could assign land, labor, or goods to a temple institution. Such acts show how deeply sacred and economic systems overlapped. The divine household owned fields, received produce, and supported dependent workers. The god became a landholder. The temple became an employer. The city became a sacred economy. Yet none of this machinery exists on the open plain around you. The gods remain without kitchens, treasuries, singers, or door guardians. No calendar tells priests when a festival should occur. No sacred vessel waits upon a shelf. Time itself has not become ritualized. Religious calendars later divide the year through processions, offerings, mourning ceremonies, seasonal celebrations, and royal participation. Repetition gives society rhythms. The gods are remembered because ceremonies return. Without ceremonies, memory remains fragile. Perhaps this is the true purpose of the temple. It does not simply house a deity, it houses remembrance. A sacred name spoken in one generation may disappear. A building rebuilt again and again tells descendants where to continue speaking it. Place anchors tradition. Tradition gives the gods endurance. You kneel and place your palm against the bare soil. It is warm, powdery, and untouched by foundation stones. Beneath your hand lies the possibility of a wall. One day, workers may dig here. They may lay bricks in careful courses. They may hide beads, figurines, metal objects, or inscribed deposits beneath the corners. A ruler may declare that the god commanded the work through a dream. The building will rise. With it, the deity will gain rooms, servants, meals, festivals, and a public identity. For now, the sacred world has none of these comforts. The gods remain powerful but unhoused. They possess domains but no courtyards. They receive no bread. They hear no hymn. The open sky stands above them. The earth carries their weight without foundation. Their presence fills the landscape, yet no doorway marks where reverence should begin. Worship has not found its architecture. The gods wait without temples, older than the institutions that will define them, and strangely distant from the people who do not yet exist to serve them. A dull rhythm begins somewhere beyond the open plain. At first it resembles distant thunder, then the pattern becomes regular, too measured for weather. Something heavy strikes earth, pauses, and strikes again. The sound belongs to Lem. You move toward it across ground marked by deep impressions. Long trenches cut through the soil, mud clings to their edges, while heaps of wet clay rise beneath a dim sky. Figures work inside the channels. They are not human. Human. Their bodies carry divine strength, yet their movements look tired. Shoulders bend beneath baskets, hands grip tools polished by repeated use, feet sink into mud with every step. The gods are working. Mesopotamian traditions sometimes preserve a striking idea. Before humanity received its place in the world, lesser divine beings may have performed difficult labour themselves. They dug waterways, moved earth, maintained fields, and carried burdens. Immortality did not guarantee leisure. Some gods governed, others worked. This difference reveals a sacred hierarchy resembling ancient society. Great households contained rulers, officials, specialists, dependents, servants, and labourers. The divine world could mirror the same arrangement, with powerful gods issuing commands while lower ranks carried them out. The cosmos had a workforce. You stand beside a trench where dark water begins to gather. The mud smells rich and heavy. Each tool stroke makes a wet scraping sound, followed by the dull fall of soil into a basket. No one speaks. Breathing fills the silence. A worker lifts the basket to his shoulder. Mud runs down his arm. He climbs the bank, empties the load, and returns without rest. The task has no visible end. Ancient irrigation made such work essential. Canals brought water to fields, but they quickly filled with silt. Banks weakened. Reeds spread through neglected channels. Workers had to clear, repair, deepen, and redirect the system constantly. Records from the southern Mesopotamia confirm that rulers organised large labour forces for these projects. Administrative tablets list rations, work groups, supervisors, tools, and assignments. Researchers at the University of Chicago and the University of Pennsylvania have used these records to reconstruct the scale of collective labour. A functioning city depended upon organised effort. Someone always had to dig. The sacred story raises an uncomfortable question. If divine beings once carried these burdens, why did their work stop? The answer begins with exhaustion. You hear the rhythm change, tools strike more slowly, baskets remain on the ground, one worker leans against the trench wall, pressing muddy hands to his knees. Even divine bodies resist endless strain. A murmur passes through the labouring ranks. It begins quietly, then spreads from one group to another. The sound contains anger, but also disbelief. Why should they continue? Why should some command while others carry? The question feels ancient because it never becomes old. Later Mesopotamian accounts describe lesser gods protesting against their toil. Their complaints grow into rebellion. Tools may be cast down, work may cease. The divine labourers gather against the authority that imposed their burdens. The scene is not simply mythic drama. It reflects a world where labour obligations shape daily life. Farmers owed work. Temple dependents received rations. Conquered populations could be assigned heavy tasks. Royal projects demanded bodies. The gods complain in the language of workers because the storytellers knew that language well. You smell sweat mixed with wet earth. It is a human scent. Though the bodies around you are sacred, their divine status does not remove fatigue. That detail makes the story powerful. A distant ruler may appear almost godlike, seated above everyone in clean robes. A labourer knee-deep in a canal sees authority differently. To him, order is weight carried on the shoulder. The divine protest exposes that tension. Order benefits someone. Labour sustains it. A mainstream historical fact appears throughout Mesopotamian administration. Workers often received barley, oil, wool, or beer as rations rather than wages in the modern sense. Tablets record precise amounts based upon status, age, task, and institution. The system was efficient. It was also unequal. A supervisor could receive more than a digger. A specialist might receive different provisions. Women and children could appear in labour records alongside adult men. Each assigned measured distributions. Life became a column of quantities. The divine workers in the story receive no visible ration. Perhaps sacred beings do not need bread. Still, they understand injustice perfectly. One worker raises his tool and lets it fall, not into the earth, onto the bank. The sound is sharp. Others follow. Wood and stone strike the ground across the trench. The rhythm of labour ends, replaced by scattered impacts and low voices. The silence that follows feels dangerous. A quirky detail from ancient labour history concerns the vast quantities of beer distributed in institutional settings. Beer was nutritious, familiar, and often safer than stagnant water. Workers could receive measured portions as part of their rations. Civilization was partly built by people officially paid in grain and beer. The arrangement sounds cheerful until you remember the heat, mud, and relentless schedules. A jar does not make the trench shallower. It merely makes the evening more tolerable. The divine labourers gather in a rough circle. Their bodies carry mud, dust, and weariness. No crowns mark them. No shining weapons announce heroic rank. Their power lies in number. One voice becomes many. The complaint rises toward the divine rulers. Scholars at Oxford University and Yale University have examined how myths of divine labour connect social organisation with ideas about human creation. One interpretation sees the story as a theological explanation for why humans must work. Another emphasises conflict among divine classes. The debate remains open. Were these stories defending hierarchy? Were they quietly criticising it? Perhaps they did both. A myth can explain why labour exists while also admitting that labour feels unfair. The divine rebellion gives voice to resentment, but the story may eventually restore order by transferring the burden elsewhere. That solution will benefit the gods. It will not necessarily benefit the new workers. You watch the trench fill solely with seepage. Without continued digging, the water has nowhere to go. Mud slides inward. The abandoned tools begin to disappear beneath it. The unfinished canal becomes a warning. If labour stops, order weakens. Fields dry. Food fails. Cities suffer. The workers therefore possess leverage. Their refusal threatens the entire system. Even rulers depend upon those beneath them. This truth is easy to forget from a throne. It is obvious inside a ditch. The divine council must respond. Authority cannot simply command tired workers to continue forever, especially when those workers are gods themselves. A new arrangement becomes necessary. You sense distant movement above the plain. Powerful figures gather where the air brightens. They do not enter the mud. They remain at the edge, observing the halted work. Their distance says everything. The labourers stand below. The rulers stand above. Between them lies the unfinished world. A lesser god speaks on behalf of the others. His voice is calm, but every word carries weight. He describes the long years of toil, the burden of baskets, and the endless digging. He does not ask for praise. He asks for release. The complaint transforms labour into a political crisis. Work is no longer a natural condition. It becomes an obligation that can be questioned. That change is profound. The gods have discovered that suffering can become collective language. A council decree from earthly Mesopotamia could assign workers to canals, fields, temples, or military projects. Official language made obligation appear orderly. The myth reverses that process. The workers speak back. Their words expose the bodies hidden behind administration. A tablet may record 100 labourers. It does not record 100 aching backs. The story does. You hear a low wind passing over the abandoned trench. It moves through tool handles, making them knock softly together. No one resumes work. The divine rulers begin to consider another solution. The tasks must continue. But the workers demand relief. Someone else must carry the baskets, clear the channels, and maintain the fields. The idea forms quietly. It is practical. It is terrible. A new kind of being may be shaped for service. This being will be strong enough to work, fragile enough to obey, and numerous enough to maintain the world. It may receive intelligence, but not freedom from need. Hunger will keep it moving. Mortality will keep it replaceable. Perhaps that the story dares not state the calculation so coldly. Ancient myths speak through symbol, ritual, and sacred purpose, yet the structure remains difficult to ignore. Humanity may enter not as the final glory of creation, but as a solution to a labour dispute. The thought is almost humorous. It is also deeply unsettling. You stand beside the trench as the divine workers wait. Their rebellion has opened a space in the cosmic order. Authority can no longer continue unchanged. The mud cools around their feet. The baskets remain empty. The fields beyond the channel still do not exist. Somewhere, hands are preparing clay. The world requires workers. The gods have decided they will no longer be the ones. Warm clay rests beneath your fingers. It yields easily, holding every line pressed into its surface. The material feels humble, almost ordinary, yet the gathered divine powers regard it with complete attention. A decision has been made. Humanity will enter the world through work. The oldest Mesopotamian traditions do not always describe people as rulers of creation. They often present human beings as servants within an existing sacred economy. The gods require food, temples, music, offerings, canals, fields, and regular cares. Someone must provide them. You watch the clay take shape upon a low stone platform. Hands press inward, lift, smooth, and correct. The first body does not emerge through a flash of light. It appears through patient craft. A shoulder forms, a chest rises, fingers separate from a small, unfinished hand. The process resembles the labour of a potter, but the purpose is far greater. This vessel must carry breath, awareness, hunger, obedience, memory, and enough cleverness to survive. Too fragile, and it cannot work. Too powerful, and it may refuse. Creation becomes a careful compromise. Several Mesopotamian texts connect humanity with clay and divine substance. The details vary between compositions, but the central image remains consistent. Human life joins earthly material with something drawn from the sacred realm. You are made from what lies beneath your feet. You are also made from what cannot be seen. This mixed nature explains much about the human condition. People can compose hymns, calculate grain, design cities, and observe the stars. They can also become thirsty, frightened, exhausted, and buried beneath the same soil they once cultivated. The sacred element dreams, the clay element aches. Researchers at Yale University, Oxford University, and the University of Pennsylvania have examined these creation traditions across Sumerian and later Mesopotamian literature. Their work shows that no single account governed every city or period. One story emphasizes divine planning. Another focuses upon birth goddesses. Another places greater weight upon the transfer of labour. Together, they reveal a society asking why human beings exist within a world demanding constant effort. The answer is not flattering. People are needed because the system requires maintenance. You hear water being poured into a shallow bowl. It darkens the clay and releases a cool mineral scent. The mixture becomes smoother, easier to shape. A divine mother bends over the form. Her hands no pressure. Her hands no restraint. Around her, the gathered gods wait with the solemn impatience of officials watching someone else perform delicate work. Even eternity enjoys supervision. The humour softens the unease. Because the new being has not chosen its purpose, it will awaken inside an arrangement already established. Fields will need tending, animals will need feeding, shrines will need cleaning, offerings will need preparing. The human body is designed within obligation. This idea reflects the social world of ancient Mesopotamia. Large households depended upon ranked labour. Temples and palaces controlled land, workshops, storage rooms, herds, and dependent workers. Administrative tablets record people through tasks and rations. A person might appear as a brewer, shepherd, weaver, boatman, gardener, porter, or canal labourer. The record rarely describes what that person loved. It describes what that person owed. A mainstream historical fact emerges from thousands of such tablets. Institutions distributed barley, oil, wool, and other goods according to work, age, status, and household position. The system could sustain large communities. It could also reduce a life to measured portions. The sacred creation story enlarges that system until it fills the cosmos. Humanity receives existence as a ration and labour as its assigned duties. You see the first chest lift slightly. No breath enters yet. The body waits between object and person. This narrow interval carries the entire mystery. Clay can hold shape without knowing it has shape. A living being must recognize hunger, danger, effort, and perhaps beauty. Why grant awareness to a servant? A mind makes work more effective. It also makes suffering possible. The gods may need skilled workers rather than mindless figures. Canals require judgment. Crops require timing. Animals wander. Tools break. Storms arrive without asking permission. Human intelligence becomes useful because the world is difficult. That intelligence may also become troublesome. A thinking worker notices inequality. A mortal servant wonders about death. A person who feeds the gods may eventually ask why divine beings require feeding at all. The clay face remains still, but the questions already seem present. A curious fringe theory claims these myths preserve memories of deliberate biological engineering by advanced visitors. The tablets do not provide evidence for laboratories, machines, or scientific manipulation. Such readings replace ancient symbolism with modern fetists. The original idea is more haunting without mechanical additions. Humanity is shaped deliberately for labour, yet given enough sacred quality to become unpredictable. The creation is not a machine, it is a contradiction. An open scholarly debate concerns whether these stories justified social hierarchy or reflected anxiety about it. Some historians view them as explanations supporting temple service and royal labour systems. Others detect a quieter criticism. If even lesser gods rebel against exhausting work, perhaps the storytellers understood that endless obligation was unreasonable. The transfer of labour solves a divine problem while creating a human one. The myth preserves both sides. Hard summer. The cost of order is rarely shared equally. You hear a soft sound from the clay figure. It may be air entering the throat. It may be moisture settling in the chest. Then the mouth opens. The first breath is slow, uncertain, and strangely intimate. The body trembles as awareness spreads through it and cold reaches the skin. Weight enters the limbs. Sound becomes meaningful. The new being looks upward. That first gaze contains no worship yet. It contains confusion. The gods stand above, radiant and established. The human lies below, damp with clay, possessing no name, history, clothing, or memory. Power is immediately visible. No lesson is needed. A divine voice gives instructions. The words are calm, almost generous. Humanity will cultivate the earth, maintain sacred places, prepare offerings, and preserve the divine order. In return, people may receive protection on fertility guidance and access to civilization. The agreement sounds balanced when spoken from above, yet one side created the other. Consent becomes complicated. Ancient temple hymns often describe human service as honourable. To care for a god could bring prestige, identity, and communal purpose. Festivals created beauty, music filled courtyards. Offerings joined families to sacred tradition. Service was not experienced only as oppression. It also created belonging. A baker preparing ritual bread might feel pride. A singer performing a hymn might feel transformed. A builder raising a sanctuary might believe his work touched eternity. Humanity's role therefore cannot be reduced to slavery alone. The sacred economy offered meaning as well as burden. People worked for the gods, but they also understood their cities, laws, seasons, and survival through that relationship. The gods needed service, humans needed order. Both sides became dependent, though never equally. You watch more figures take shape. One becomes many. Bodies rise from clay in different sizes and forms. Some are strong, some are quick, some possess steady hands. Others carry voices suited for song. Variation enters as humanity immediately. So does division. Tasks will be assigned. Statuses will form. Certain people will approach inner sanctuaries. Others will remain in fields. Some will write decrees. Others will carry baskets beneath the sun. The first purpose becomes 1,000 occupations. A council decree from an ancient city might describe labourers, duty to temple, ruler, and community. Such language transforms work into moral order. The creation myth reaches deeper. It suggests that labour belongs to human identity itself. You do not merely work because society demands it. You were imagined as a being created to work. That idea can comfort or imprison. It comforts those who find meaning in contribution, skill, and shared effort. It imprisons those told that exhaustion is sacred and obedience natural. The clay body carries both possibilities. You look at its hands. They are capable of digging canals, shaping bricks, weaving cloth, and lifting offerings. They are also capable of writing complaints, breaking tools, opening forbidden doors, and reaching toward the heavens. The design contains its own uncertainty. Humanity will serve. Humanity will also question. Perhaps the gods cannot foresee this completely. Perhaps no creator fully controls what becomes conscious. The first human stands unsteadily. Mud dries along the legs. Breath grows deeper. The eyes move across the unfinished world, measuring distance and possibility. Hunger begins as a small hollow sensation beneath the ribs. That hunger will drive low. It will also drive invention. People will cultivate grain because they must eat. They will build shelters because bodies fear cold. They will form households because no one survives alone. Need becomes the engine of civilization. The divine plan transfers work, but it also releases creativity into the world. A servant learns to build, a builder learns to design, a designer begins to imagine things no god requested. This may be humanity's hidden role, not merely to maintain the sacred order, but to alter it through every act of survival. The gods receive workers. The world receives makers. You feel the clay drying upon your own hands. Fine cracks appear across the surface, marking the boundary between softness and permanence. The first human takes a step, then another. No temple bell rings. No chorus celebrates. A living body simply moves towards the waiting fields, carrying divine breath inside mortal clay. The purpose appears clear. The meaning remains unsettled. A line of light appears high above the empty plain. It does not resemble lightning. The brightness remains steady, narrow, and pale, like a road suspended across the sky. Along that impossible path, shapes begin to move. They are not stars. They are cities. You see walls, gates, platforms, courtyards, and towers descending through the clear air. Their forms remain distant, yet their order is unmistakable. Streets meet at deliberate angles. Sacred precincts rise above clusters of homes. Canals shine like silver threads. Civilization arrives as a gift already imagined. Several Sumerian traditions present kingship as a something lowered from heaven. The phrase does not merely describe one ruler receiving divine approval, it suggests that organized government itself belongs to the sacred order. Kingship has an origin beyond humanity. Cities may be built by human hands, but their pattern descends from divine intention. The first rulers do not invent authority. They receive it, along with duties, symbols, and dangerous expectations. The idea gives political power an ancient glow. It also places responsibility upon the throne. You stand where one of the descending cities approaches the ground. Its shadow crosses the bare earth. The air smells of baked clay, cedar smoke, and fresh water flowing through unseen channels. The city touches down without welcomed. No dust rises. Its walls simply become part of the landscape. A gateway opens before you. Beyond it, narrow streets curve between houses built from mud brick. Roofs form elevated pathways of shaded rooms. Courtyards hold grinding stones, storage jars, sleeping mats, and small ovens. Life appears organized down to the smallest corners. A city is more than walls. It is agreement made visible. People accept shared measures, shared routes, shared labor, and shared danger. Someone maintains the canal, someone guards the gate, someone judges disputes, someone records grain. Without coordination, the settlement becomes a crowd. With coordination, it becomes an institution. Archaeological research confirms that southern Mesopotamia witnessed the growth of some of the world's earliest large urban communities. At Uruk, excavators uncovered monumental buildings, mass-produced pottery, administrative seals, and early writing connected with centralized economic activity. The evidence reveals extraordinary organization. Large populations required food, water, storage, transport, and conflict management. These needs encouraged specialized labor, record-keeping, and powerful institutions. The city created complexity. Complexity created officials. Officials created more tablets. Human history has always possessed this talent. You walk farther inside. The street beneath your feet is uneven, packed by generations of sandals, hooves, and cart wheels. Wastewater runs through a shallow channel. A donkey complains near a doorway. Civilization has arrived with impressive sacred authority. It has also arrived with smells. That contrast matters. Ancient cities were centers of ritual, trade, art, and administration. They were also crowded, noisy, dusty, and vulnerable to disease. The divine pattern met human reality immediately. A temple tower rises ahead, dominating the skyline. Around it stand workshops, storage buildings, and administrative rooms. The sacred center is also an economic center. Offerings enter. Rations leave. Workers report. Scribes count. The gods and the city become difficult to separate. In Sumerian political thought, each major city could belong to a patron deity. The god protected the community, received worship, and granted legitimacy to its ruler. The city was not simply inhabited by people. It was held in trust for a divine owner. A king therefore ruled as caretaker, shepherd, builder, judge, and military protector. His title carried grandeur, but his success depended upon harvests, canals, walls, and public order. A crown did not excuse practical failure. If the fields dried, the people noticed. If the gates broke, enemies noticed faster. Royal inscriptions often praise rulers for building temples, digging canals, restoring walls, and establishing justice. Such claims were political messages, but they also reveal expected responsibilities. The ruler maintained the city because the city reflected cosmic order. You enter a broad courtyard where officials gather beneath woven awnings. Clay tablets rest upon low benches. Each carries marks recording deliveries, labour groups, or legal agreements. A scribe wets the edge of his stylus. He does not look powerful, yet every measure depends upon his signs. Writing allows institutions to remember beyond one conversation. A promise can outlive the speaker. A debt can wait through winter. A grain delivery can be checked after the workers leave. Memory becomes administrative. Administration becomes authority. Prestigious universities have studied early tablets from Uruk and other sites, showing that writing developed alongside expanding systems of management. The earlier signs often concern goods, quantities, professions, and institutional transactions. Poetry comes later. Accounting enters first. The gods may inspire hymns, but barley inspires urgent documentation. The city descending from heaven therefore carries two sacred gifts. One is kingship, the other is bureaucracies. Only one appears on royal monuments. A quirky tradition from the ancient king lists describes rulers with reigns lasting thousands of years. These impossible lengths have inspired countless fringe theories about lost superhuman dynasties or visitors from beyond the earth. The tablets offer no reliable evidence for such beings. The immense numbers likely express symbolic antiquity, divine closeness, or a legendary scale beyond ordinary history. Still, the image is powerful. A king rules so long that generations pass like seasons. His city stands before memory. His name becomes almost geological. Then the numbers suddenly shrink. Later rulers possess reigns closer to human possibility. Mythic time yields gradually to historical time. Though the boundary remains uncertain, the list behaves like a bridge. One end rests in sacred imagination. The other approaches documented kings. Scholars continue to debate how these traditions were compiled and why certain cities received priority. Some researchers see political claims hidden inside the sequence. By placing one city earlier than another, scribes could grant it deeper prestige. Antiquity becomes a form of power. A city that came first might claim greater sacred importance. A dynasty linked to ancient rulers could present itself as heir to cosmic order. The list does not merely remember history, it arranges legitimacy. You move toward the royal quarter. The buildings are larger, but their walls remain made from the same earth as ordinary homes. Guards stand near a doorway decorated with coloured cones pressed into plaster. Inside, the ruler sits beneath a canopy. He holds a staff and wears layered cloth. This was layered cloth. He is human. That fact creates tension. Kingship descends from heaven, but the king still becomes tired, ill, frightened, and mortal. His body belongs to clay, while his office claims sacred origin. The office survives. The man does not. This separation helps institutions endure. A ruler dies, but kingship passes onward. The symbol remains available for another body. Human weakness is hidden inside ceremonial continuity. A new king receives old titles. A new reign claims restoration. The city pretends nothing essential has changed. You hear musicians in a nearby hall. Drums pulse softly. A lyre answers with bright, measured notes. Music accompanies ritual, celebration, mourning, and royal diapours. Sound fills the palace with controlled emotion. Outside, workers unload baskets. Inside, poets compare the ruler to lions, storms, mountains, and radiant stars. Such language does not describe his morning appearance. It describes the power he must embody. Royal image and daily reality rarely meet comfortably. That remains one of civilization's oldest traditions. The city expands around you. Houses multiply, markets gather near gates. Boats bring timber, stone, metals, and luxury goods from distant regions. Southern Mesopotamia lacks many natural resources needed for monumental construction. Trade connects the plain with mountains, coastlands, and foreign settlements. Cities become knots in enormous networks. Copper arrives from afar. Timber travels by river. Stone crosses deserts. Ideas travel with them. A merchant returning from a long journey brings more than goods. He brings stories, measures, names, songs, and rumours about unfamiliar gods. Urban life grows through exchange. It also grows through inequality. Some homes contain fine vessels, jewellery, and imported materials. Others hold little beyond mats, tools, and storage jars. The city organises abundance. It does not distribute abundance evenly. An open scholarly debate concerns whether early urbanization improved life for most inhabitants. Cities offered protection, trade, specialized work, religious identity, and access to organized resources. They also brought taxation, crowding, disease to hierarchy, and labor demands. The evidence supports both experience and a skilled craft worker may prosper. A canal labourer may not share the enthusiasm. The sacred claim that cities descended from heaven could make urban order feel inevitable. Yet every brick still required hands. Every wall demanded maintenance. Every institution depended upon people who might never enter the halls where decisions were made. Heaven provided the plan. Earth supplied the workers. You climb the temple platform and look across the roofs. Smoke rises from ovens. Children cross courtyards. Animals crowd narrow lanes. Traders argue beneath cloth shades. The city feels alive because thousands of private lives overlap. No ruler can fully control them. No scribe can record them all. A woman hides grain for her household. A worker takes a longer route to avoid a supervisor. A child scratches a game into the dust. Human life exceeds the institution created to organize it. Perhaps this is why cities feel both sacred and unruly. They express order while producing endless surprises. The plan may descend from heaven, but the inhabitants reshape it every day. A street bends around an older wall. A workshop becomes a home. A shrine appears inside a neighborhood. Civilizations are never receiving cuneiform. It is revised into continuously. The sunlight lowers across the city. Brick walls turn amber. Shadows lengthen through doorways. From the upper platform, the settlement resembles a pattern pressed into the earth. It seems deliberate from above. At street level, it feels improvised. That difference captures the mystery of kingship and cities. Divine order appears clear from a distance. Human existence becomes complicated when lived inside it. The heavenly institution has reached the ground. Now it must survive dust, hunger, ambition, love, weather, and memory. The city stands. Its gates remain open. Its people begin to make it their own. The air grows damp as you approach the southern marshes. Reeds rise in dense walls, their narrow leaves brushing together under a warm wind. Water glints between them in broken strips. Mud grips your feet, and insects hover above shallow pools where fish turn beneath the surface. Somewhere ahead, Eridu waits. The ancient city rises only slightly above the surrounding plain, yet its importance reaches far beyond its size. Later Mesopotamian traditions remembered Eridu as one of the earliest cities, a place where sacred order first took root beside the deep waters. It stands near the beginning of civilization's memory. You follow a narrow path toward a low mound, gilded. The ground is layered with collapsed walls, old floors, ash, broken pottery, and the remains of repeated rebuilding. Each generation placed new structures upon older ones. The city grew upward through memory. Archaeologists uncovered a long sequence of sacred buildings at Eridu, each constructed over the remains of an earlier shrine. The earliest structures were modest. Later temples became larger, more formal and more carefully arranged. The pattern suggests continuity. A sacred place remained sacred even when its walls bore. Researchers from major universities and archaeological institutes have studied Eridu as a key site for understanding early settlement, ritual, and urban development in southern Mesopotamia. Their findings show that organized religious spaces appeared there during very early periods of village growth. The temple came before the great city. That fact carries unusual weight. It suggests that people gathered around sacred space before monumental government fully emerged. Worship, storage, communal labor, and identity may have developed together around one enduring location. You stand where an early shrine may once have faced the marsh. The building is small, Its walls are made from mud brick. A simple platform rises against one side, while a doorway opens toward the water. Inside, the room smells of damp clay, hamo, and fish oil. No towering monument is required. The sacred presence is already here. Eridu became closely associated with the wise lord of deep fresh water, a god linked with craft, purification, intelligence, and hidden knowledge. His domain lay beneath the earth, where sweet waters were thought to gather beyond ordinary sight. The marshland suited him perfectly. Water emerged everywhere, channels appeared and vanished. The boundary between land and river remained uncertain. A person living here would never imagine the earth as completely dry or stable. The ground floated, shifted, cracked, and softened with the seasons. So the city stood beside a hidden world. You hear the slap of a small boat against reeds. A fisherman pushes through the water using a long pole. His vessel is made from bundled reeds coated with dark material to resist leaking. A net lies at his feet. He moves quietly. Marsh communities depended upon fish, birds, reeds, clay, and water roots. Reeds became roofs, mats, baskets, fences, boats, and fuel. Mud became walls and vessels. The environment supplied nearly everything, though little arrived without labour. Eridu's earliest inhabitants built with what surrounded them. Their city was made from marsh. A mainstream historical fad emerges from excavated fish bones, pottery, hearths, and building remains. Early communities around Eridu combined fishing, herding, farming, and craft production. They did not live through one activity alone. Their source or survival depended upon flexibility. A poor harvest could be softened by fish. A change in water level could open new channels while closing old ones. Life required constant adjustment. The sacred traditions of Eridu reflect this relationship with water. Wisdom does not appear as distant thoughts separated from practical life. It is the intelligence needed to survive an unstable landscape. You must know where to dig. You must know when to plant. You must know which channel still carries water. Knowledge is not decoration. It is protection. The temple may have served as a place where such knowledge gathered. Priests observed seasons, offerings, labour, and local customs. Administrators stored goods. Craftsmen repaired objects. Elders preserved stories. Sacred and practical memory met in one building. A temple wall could hold ritual meaning. A storage room could hold the winter food supply. Both mattered. A council decree from later Mesopotamian cities often tied temples to land, workers, and water rights. Eridu's earliest institutions were probably simpler, but the same connection may have begun here. Religious authority grew beside resource management. The god of wisdom also became lord of useful order. You walk toward a basin where clean water rests inside a plastered hollow. Its surface reflects the dim interior of the shrine. A priest touches the water with 2 fingers. He sprinkles it across the threshold. The gesture is quiet, almost domestic, yet it transforms the room. Water separates impurity from readiness. It prepares bodies and objects for contact with sacred presence. Purification begins with touch. The same water that nourishes fields can also mark a spiritual boundary. This union of practical and sacred meaning gave water exceptional importance in Mesopotamian ritual. It cleaned, healed, blessed, and restored. It could also destroy. Marsh water carried insects, disease, and decay. Floods shifted homes and fields. Stagnant pools turned foul beneath the sun. Sacred water therefore represented controlled water. Purity required selection. A curious fringe idea claims that Eridu preserves the memory of a drowned civilization beneath the Persian Gulf. Supporters point toward ancient shoreline changes and submerged landscapes once exposed during colder periods. The environmental history is real. Sea levels did rise over long spans of time, yet direct evidence linking a lost Gulf settlement to Eridu's myths remains uncertain. Stories may preserve distant environmental memories, but they rarely function as precise maps. The possibility remains intriguing without becoming proof. Perhaps communities arriving near Eridu carried traditions from lands gradually lost to water. Perhaps the marsh itself encouraged stories about hidden realms beneath the surface. Or perhaps the deep waters were always symbolic. Scholars continue to debate how much historical memory survives inside sacred tradition. Some emphasize migration and environmental change. Others focus upon ritual meaning and local geography. The clay offers fragments, not certainty. You leave the shrine and climb a low platform. From here, the marsh opens across the horizon. Birds rise in sudden group. Their wings flash pale beneath the sun. Channels twist through reed beds like dark lines on a tablet. Small settlements rest on patches of firmer ground. Eridu appears less like a city placed beside nature and more like an island of order within it. This may explain its ancient prestige. The city did not conquer the marsh completely. It negotiated with it. Canals redirected water. Platforms lifted buildings. Reed structures adapted to soft ground. Every construction accepted the landscape's conditions. Later cities would become larger, wealthier, and more powerful. Their rulers would raise greater walls and announce grander claims. Eridu retained a different authority. It was old. Antiquity itself became sacred. The Sumerian king traditions place Eridu at the beginning of earthly kingship. The claim does not prove that the first historical monarchy literally began there. It reveals how later scribes understood the city's prestige. Eridu belonged to the First Age. To say that kingship descended there was to place the city near the meeting point between divine intention and human order. The earliest city becomes the first receiver. A list of rulers, cities, and transfers of power could therefore function as more than chronology. It could explain why authority moved across the land. One city held kingship, then another received it. Political change became sacred sequence. The arrangement gave instability a pattern. Dynasty rose and fell, but kingship itself continues. You hear distant chanting from the temple precinct. The voices move slowly, held together by a repeated melody. Smoke rises from a small offering fire. Fish, bread, oil, and dates may have been placed before the god. These gifts come from river, field, tree, and household. The city presents its world in miniature. An offering says that people remember the source of abundance. It also says that they fear losing it. This fear lies close to every early settlement. Water might fail, crops might wither, disease might enter, rivals might attack. Ritual creates a sense of relationship with forces no one controls completely. The god is honored. The city hopes to continue. Eridu's sacred reputation may have grown because it embodied continuity across environmental and political uncertainty. Its temple was rebuilt repeatedly, preserving location through change. The walls fell. The place remained. That distinction is important. A building can vanish while memory stays attached to the ground. People return, rebuild, and say that the sacred presence never left. The city becomes older than its visible remains. An open scholarly question concerns whether Eridu truly deserves the title of earliest city, or whether later tradition elevated its importance beyond archaeological reality. Other settlements also developed early. Urban growth occurred through several centres rather than one miraculous beginning. Still, Eridu occupies a unique position in cultural memory. Historical first place and remembered first place are not always identical. Memory chooses according to meaning. You descend toward the water as evening settles over the marsh. The heat softens, reeds cast long shadows across the channels. A boat moves slowly toward the settlement, carrying baskets and bundled plants. Lamps begin to glow inside low houses. The city does not appear grand. It appears persistent. That may be its deepest power. Eridu stands where firm ground meets water, where village life meets sacred institution, and where human settlement meets the oldest imagined depths. The city remembers a beginning no witness could have seen. Its temples preserve that memory through rebuilding. Its god guards wisdom beneath the surface. Its marshes hide paths that change with every season. You listen to water moving through reeds. The sound is gentle, but never still. Perhaps civilization began like this, not with a trumpet or royal commandant, but with people returning to the same uncertain ground and building once more. The tablet lies beneath a cold white lamp. Its left edge is missing. Several signs have collapsed into shallow scars, while others remain sharp enough to catch tiny shadows. You lean closer, searching for a sentence that no longer survives in one complete piece. The damage is not decoration. It controls what can be known. Ancient clay tablets often reached modern scholars through broken rooms, collapsed shelves, disturbed graves, private collections, and excavations conducted under very different standards. A fragment may preserve half a line, while its neighbouring piece rests in another museum under another catalogue number. Sometimes the pieces are reunited, sometimes they remain strangers. You notice one sign near the broken edge. It could be read in more than one way because part of its shape has vanished. A short wedge may belong to the original mark, or it may be a crack produced by pressure. The difference changes the word. The word changes the sentence. The sentence changes creation. Cuneiform writing developed across many centuries, and signs could carry several sounds or meanings. A reader must consider grammar, context, period, scribal habit, and parallels from other texts. This is not guessing. It is disciplined uncertainty. Scholars trained in Sumerian study spend years learning how signs behave across different compositions. They compare photographs, hand copies, older publications, museum records, and the physical tablet itself. Even then, modernity may remain impossible. A mainstream historical fact appears in the vast tablet collections held by institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania, Yale University, and the British Museum. These collections preserve literary fragments copied by ancient students, temple scribes, and professional scholars. Many texts survive in several versions. Those versions do not always agree. One scribe may omit a line, another may change a word, a third may preserve an older spelling that later readers barely understood. The ancient world had editorial variation. It simply lacked polite notes explaining why. You imagine two students seated in a schoolroom, each copying the same composition. One hears the teacher clearly, the other is distracted by heat, hunger, or a fly circling his face. A sign is missed. A line shifts. Thousands of years later, modern experts debate theology because one tired student wanted lunch. The thought is amusing, but it reveals a serious problem. Every surviving tablet is both a source and an object made by a particular person. Scribes made choices. They also made mistakes. Some tablets contain corrections where clay was smoothed and rewritten. Others preserve cramped signs inserted between lines. A copyist might realize too late that a phrase had been omitted. The error remains visible. It becomes part of the evidence. You run your eyes across a group of wedges that may describe a primordial condition. One reading suggests that no god had yet appeared. Another suggests that no divine function had yet been assigned. Those ideas sound similar. They are not identical. The first implies absence. The second implies unorganized presence. A world without gods differs greatly from a world where sacred beings exist without titles, temples, or duties. One translation produces a cosmic void. Another produces a crowded waiting room. The tablet does not settle the difference easily. Researchers at Oxford University and Yale University have emphasized the importance of grammatical particles in Sumerian interpretation. A tiny element can alter tense, agency, direction, or relationship. The signs may be small. Their consequences are enormous. You can feel the patience required for this work. A scholar sits for hours beneath controlled light, turning the tablet slowly to catch shadows from different angles. A photograph may flatten a wedge. A hand copy may simplify damage. The object itself reveals depth, pressure, and movement left by the stylus. Reading becomes partly an act of touch performed through sight. A damaged sign near the edge may resemble the name of a deity. It may also represent an ordinary noun describing earth, water, or birth. Both readings fit part of the line. Neither fits perfectly. An open scholarly debate phrase appears often in serious discussion. The surviving evidence permits more than one reconstruction. That sentence is not a weakness, it is honesty. Ancient texts invite confidence because they look permanent. Clay feels solid, wedges appear fixed. Yet the meaning remains dependent upon the language, comparison, and human judgment. The object survives. The interpretation moves. A curious fringe claim says that scholars deliberately hide translations revealing advanced beings or lost civilizations. Such accusations usually grow from misunderstood signs, selective quotations, or modern words forced onto ancient vocabulary. The real disagreements are less theatrical. They concern grammar, context, damaged surfaces, and competing literary parallels. Those disputes are quieter. They're also more interesting. A responsible translator may write one phrase in the main text and place another in a note. A later scholar may reverse the choice after comparing a newly published fragment. Knowledge changes through accumulation. One small piece can alter an entire passage. You imagine a museum drawer opening after decades. Inside rests an unremarkable clay fragment labelled with a number. A researcher notices that its broken edge resembles a tablet published long ago. Photographs are compared, the joins match. Suddenly, two incomplete sentences become one longer passage. A lost verb returns. A divine name becomes clear. The ancient voice grows slightly louder. Such joins have occurred in cuneiform studies, allowing scholars to restore works scattered across collections. The process resembles assembling a puzzle without knowing the final image, or there may be thousands of pieces. Many belong to other puzzles. Some have turned to dust. The work demands restraint because a tempting join can be wrong. Similar, clay, handwriting, and subject matter do not guarantee that fragments belong together. Excitement must wait for measurement. The broken edges must agree. The lines must continue naturally. The tablet must make physical sense. You hear the faint squeak of a chair in the reading room. Outside, rain taps against modern windows. Inside, a scholar traces a sign on paper and pauses. The pause matters. Translation is often built from pauses. One possible reading suggests that heaven and earth were still joined. Another implies that their names had not yet been proclaimed. The distinction shifts emphasis from physical separation to linguistic recognition. Did creation begin through movement? Did it begin through naming? Perhaps the text once allowed both meanings. Ancient poetry often uses language with several layers. A phrase may describe nature, ritual, and authority at the same time. Modern translation prefers one clear sentence. The original may have preferred resonance. This creates another difficulty. English requires choices that Sumerian may leave open. Pronouns, subjects, and relationships can be less explicit than a modern reader expects. A translator must sometimes apply what the ancient line only implies. Every supplied word carries risk. Too little explanation creates confusion. Too much creates certainty the tablet never possessed. The oldest creation traditions are especially vulnerable because readers approach them with powerful expectations. Some want a familiar creator, others seek evidence of science, visitors, catastrophe, or secret history. The damaged clay becomes a mirror. People find what they came hoping to see. Scholarly method tries to resist that pull through comparison and caution. Researchers examine vocabulary across administrative records, hymns, myths, legal texts, and word lists. A rare term in a creation passage may appear elsewhere in a grain account. That ordinary use can clarify the sacred line. Cosmic mystery may depend upon bookkeeping. The irony would probably please a Sumerian scribe. You study another fracture crossing three lines. The break destroys the end of one sentence and the beginning of the next. A god may have acted. A goddess may have spoken. A natural force may have changed without any divine command. All three possibilities remain open. The missing clay holds the answer more securely than any surviving sign. That absence creates temptation. A translator may reconstruct a likely phrase using repeated patterns from similar texts. Brackets then mark the restored words, reminding readers that the clay itself does not preserve them fully. The brackets are small doors. Behind them stands informed imagination. Used carefully, reconstruction restores meaning. Used recklessly, it manufactures it. A prestigious university researcher may propose one restoration, while another specialist offers a different solution. Both can be serious, careful sung, and well-informed. Disagreement does not mean failures. It means the evidence has limits. The public often expects experts to produce one final translation. Ancient language rarely behaves so obediently. New fragments appear. Old photographs improve. Sign readings change. A passage understood as ritual may later seem mythological, or the reverse. The text remains ancient. Its modern life continues. You feel a quiet unease as you look at the broken edge. The missing portion may once have contained the clearest statement about what existed before the divine order. Perhaps it named an older power. Perhaps it described only water. Perhaps it contained nothing remarkable at all. The mystery survives because the fragment refuses completion. This is not an invitation to invent. It is an invitation to remain patient. Historical truth often appears in degrees rather than declarations. Or one reading may be likely subject. Another may remain possible. A third may be attractive but unsupported. Careful scholarship keeps those levels separate. The distinction protects the past from modern desires. The lamp above the tablet hums softly. Every surviving wedge looks suddenly precious. Each mark has crossed ruined cities, changing kingdoms, burial, excavation, transport, storage, and translations. The sentence is damaged. It is not silent. You can still hear several meanings moving within it, none strong enough to dismiss the others completely. Perhaps that uncertainty belongs to the story itself. A world before fixed divine order should not arrive through perfectly fixed language. Its description survives fractured, unstable, and open to several paths. The tablet offers no final voice. It offers You lean back from the glass as the signs return to shadow. The oldest theology remains suspended between readings, held inside clay that preserves just enough to deepen the question. A deeper voice enters the story. It comes from another city, another century, and another language. Yet the old landscape remains faintly visible beneath it. The names have changed, the divine ranks have shifted, the quiet beginning now carries conflict. Memory has been rewritten. Mesopotamian civilization endured through long periods of migration, conquest, political change, and linguistic transformation. Sumerian gradually ceased to be spoken in daily life, but scribes continued studying it within temples and schools. The language became ancient while the culture remained alive. Later Babylonian scholars inherited Sumerian traditions much as a modern reader inherits fragments from a distant civilization. They copied old compositions, translated difficult terms, and adapted sacred stories for new audiences. Preservation did not mean perfect repetition. Every retelling made choices. You hear water moving in darkness, but it no longer feels calm. Two primeval powers stir within it, one associated with fresh water and another with the salt sea. They mingle before later gods appear. Their union produces divine generations, but those younger beings disturb the old silence. Their movement becomes noise, their energy becomes threat. Creation now begins with tension. The later Babylonian composition, commonly known as the Great Creation Epic, presents a dramatic sequence of divine conflict. Younger gods challenge older powers. Alliances form, weapons are prepared. The universe emerges through victory. This differs from quieter Sumerian images of separation, birth, and gradual organization. Yet the underlying structure remains familiar. There are ancient waters. There are divine generations. There is conflict over authority. A young order replaces an older condition. The old framework supervire beneath a new political imagination. A mainstream historical fact appears in the discovery of tablets from the Royal Library at Nineveh. Archaeologists recovered copies of Babylonian literary works there, including portions of the creation epic. Researchers from institutions such as Oxford University and Yale University have studied these tablets alongside older Sumerian compositions. Their comparisons reveal continuity and transformation. A story can preserve an ancient pattern while changing its emotional center. The earlier tradition may describe cosmic arrangement as a sacred process. The later version may describe it as conquest. This change does not necessarily mean one story replaced another completely. Mesopotamian religion supported many overlapping traditions. Different temples, cities, and scribal schools could preserve distinct accounts. The cosmos had these several remembered beginnings. No central authority forced every tablet into agreement. You enter a Babylonian temple courtyard during a festival. Torches burn along plastered walls. Priests carry tablets wrapped in cloth. Musicians wait beside drums and stringed instruments. The creation story is not merely read. It is performed. Words rise into the night while incense gathers under the stars. The audience hears divine struggle as part of sacred ceremony and civic identity. A particular god stands at the center of the later version. He defeats the primeval enemy, organizes the universe, assigns divine roles, and establishes his supremacy. His rise reflects more than theology. It reflects the rise of power. When the city gained political importance, its patron deity gained cosmic importance as well. Sacred history expanded to match earthly power. The god of the capital became ruler of creation. Politics entered the beginning of time. This pattern appears often in ancient religion. A victorious city does not merely claim stronger armies. It may claim deeper divine favour, older legitimacy, and a larger place within the cosmic story. The capital becomes sacred geography. Its ruler becomes guardian of universal order. Its god becomes heir to every ancient power. Even creation can be reorganized by empire. The idea sounds almost sarcastic because the mechanism remains so recognizable. A government rises, and suddenly the universe has always been leading toward its greatness. Ancient scribes were not immune to civic confidence. Still, the later stories are not simple propaganda. They carry genuine theological depth, poetic beauty, and philosophical tension. They ask why order requires authority. They ask whether younger generations must overcome older ones. They ask whether creation can occur without destruction. You hear the clash of divine weapons across the imagined sea. The sound is immense, but the narration remains distant, softened by ritual memory. The primeval body becomes material for the world. One portion warms the heaven, another forms the earth. Creation is no longer a gentle division of joined realms. It is the transformation of defeated chaos into structure. The imagery is severe, yet it expresses a familiar human experience. Cities often arise from the ruins of earlier cities. New palaces stand over destroyed walls. Victorious kings reuse stones, statues, and inscriptions. Order is repeatedly built from remains. The myth enlarges that pattern until the universe itself becomes a monument raised over defeat. A quirky fringe interpretation claims that these divine battles preserve memories of planetary collisions or ancient astronomical catastrophes. Such theories usually force poetic images into modern scientific frameworks without sufficient evidence. The texts do mention celestial bodies, storms, and vast destruction. That does not make them technical records. Their primary language is mythic, political, and ritual. The original meaning is already complex enough. The divine battle may represent generational conflict, imperial ambition, seasonal danger, or the fear that an established order can collapse. It may carry several meanings at once. Prestigious university researchers have also examined how later scribes explained older Sumerian gods through equivalence lists. One divine name could be matched with another from a different language or city. These lists helped scholars translate sacred traditions. They also reshaped the them. A local power might become a form of greater imperial deity. An obscure god might survive only as a title attached to someone more famous. The divine world became increasingly connected. It also became increasingly absorbed. You imagine a Babylonian student copying two columns. One contains an old Sumerian name, the other contains its later equivalent. The exercise looks orderly. He does by he talks. The reality is not. Two gods may share traits without being identical. Their temples, myths, families, and rituals may differ. The list compresses difference into correspondence. This is useful for scholarship. It is dangerous for common for memory. Centuries later, readers may assume the two were always one being. The older identity fades behind the newer name. An open scholarly debate concerns how deliberately Babylonian authors reworked Sumerian material. Some historians emphasize conscious adaptation by learned scribes. Others see a slower process shaped by oral tradition, ritual performance, political change, and repeated copying. The evidence supports both possibilities. A skilled scholar could recognize an ancient motif and place it carefully into a new composition. At the same time, stories change naturally as generations inherit them. Memory does not require a committee to become different. It changes whenever a teller chooses emphasis. The Babylonian creation epic also presents humanity as a solution to divine labor. People are formed so the gods may be relieved from work and properly maintained through offerings. The idea echoes older traditions, yet the details become more dramatic. Humanity may be fashioned from clay mixed with the blood of a defeated divine rebel. This gives mortals a disturbing inheritance. People carry both obedience and rebellion within their substance. Their bodies Their origin contains conflict. The symbolism is powerful. Human beings are capable of building temples, preserving law, and offering praise. They are also capable of refusing, plotting, and overturning authority. The myth places both possibilities inside creation itself. You feel the weight of that inheritance as the ritual voice continues. The first human breath does not come from peaceful clay alone. It carries memory of divine struggle. Perhaps this explains why later Mesopotamian stories often portray humanity as necessary but troublesome. People are noisy, they multiply, they disturb divine rest. They depend upon the gods while continually testing divine patience. The relationship is unstable from the beginning. A god may protect a city today. Tomorrow, the city may fall. A king may claim eternal favor. His dynasty may vanish within decades. Mesopotamian history offered little reason to trust permanence. Its myths learned the same caution. You walk through a scribal library where shelves hold tablets from different centuries. One preserves a Sumerian hymn, another contains a Babylonian epic, a third lists divine names in two languages. The room feels like a chamber of echoes. No voice stands alone. Each composition answers older traditions, even when it changes them completely. A peaceful separation becomes a battle. An ancient mother becomes a monstrous enemy. A local god becomes king of heaven. A sacred system becomes an imperial one. Yet beneath these changes, the oldest questions remain. What existed first? Why did the gods require order? Why was humanity created? Why does civilization depend upon labor and authority? The later stories do not erase those questions. They sharpen them. The Babylonian version may feel louder, but its foundation remains ancient. Water still lies beneath creation. Divine generations still struggle for place. Humanity still enters an arrangement already shaped by sacred need. The names change. The unease remains. As the ritual ends, the final words disappear into incense and darkness. The audience leaves the courtyard carrying a story fitted to its own city and time. Far beneath that polished epic, older fragments continue to breathe. Their silence survives inside the new voice. A thin crack crosses the tablet from corner to corner. It passes through several signs, removes part of a name, and leaves one sentence suspended without a clear ending. The damage seems almost deliberate, as though the clay has chosen the exact place where certainty would have been most useful. You lean closer, nothing returns. The missing lines do not reveal whether the earliest power was water, earth, darkness, or something no surviving translation can identify. They preserve only an absence shaped like an answer. This absence has become part of the tradition. Ancient Mesopotamian literature survives through accidents. Clay tablets endure because buildings burned, shelves collapsed, rooms were abandoned, or broken pieces became buried beneath later construction. Preservation often begins with destruction. A tablet baked hard in a fire may survive longer than one stored safely in a peaceful archive. A city destroyed in war can leave clearer records than a city emptied slowly and reused for generations. History possesses an uncomfortable sense of irony. The silence around the earliest theology may therefore reflect archaeology rather than belief. Scribes might have known complete stories that modern readers possess only in scattered pieces. A line missing today may once have been recited easily by students. A damaged divine name may once have been familiar to every priest in one city. Loss makes the strange appear mysterious. You imagine a temple library near the end of a troubled reign. Tablets stand on wooden shelves or rest in baskets, grouped according to subject. There are hymns, lists, rituals, omens, legal records, medical instructions, and old compositions copied for generations. Outside, voices rise. Smoke enters through a doorway. A shelf tips, clay strikes the floor. Some tablets break into large sections. Others shatter into fragments smaller than a hand. Feet cross the room, walls collapse. No librarian returns to restore the order. Centuries pass above the broken archive. Rain enters the ruins, mud gathers, new walls rise nearby. The old room disappears beneath ordinary ground. The missing lines begin their long silence. A mainstream historical fact becomes important here. Excavations at Mesopotamian sites have uncovered tablets in secondary locations, meaning they were moved, discarded, reused as building material, or displaced from their original rooms. Context can be lost even when the object survives. A tablet found beside a temple may not have belonged to that temple. A fragment discovered in a house may have arrived there through ancient reuse. Location offers clues. It does not always provide certainty. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania, Oxford University, and the University of Chicago have studied excavation records to understand how tablets were stored and used. Their work shows that ancient archives were practical collections, not modern libraries arranged for future historians. Documents could be kept while useful, copied when needed, and discarded when their purpose ended. Sacred literature survived because someone considered it worth copying. That decision could jeopardize. A composition might remain popular for centuries, then vanish from the curriculum. A divine name might become obscure. A ritual might lose importance when political power moved elsewhere. Silence can begin long before a tablet breaks. It begins when copying stops. You hear the scratch of a reed stylus in a quiet schoolroom. A teacher selects which composition the students will reproduce. One story is chosen, another remains on the shelf. That simple decision determines which voice may reach the distant future. Ancient survival depends upon repetition. A text copied 50 times has 50 chances to endure. A text copied once waits alone against fire, water, insects, war, neglect, and time. The odds are not generous. This may explain why certain famous gods dominate the surviving record. Powerful temples maintained scribes, schools, states, and rituals. Their traditions produced many copies. Smaller cults may have preserved equally complex ideas with fewer resources. Their tablets were easier to lose. The silence surrounding obscure powers may reflect unequal preservation rather than unimportant belief. Even memory has wealthy patrons. A quirky theory suggests that missing tablet sections were intentionally destroyed to hide dangerous knowledge. Claims of deliberate concealment remain unsupported in most cases. Broken clay usually has ordinary explanation. Buildings fall. Objects are dropped. Collections scatter. Conquerors sometimes damage inscriptions, but random fractures create far more tenants than secret guardians ever could. The truth is less theatrical and more unsettling. No conspiracy is required. Time alone is sufficient. You lift an imagined fragment beneath the white light. Its broken edge is rough with grains missing from the surface. One line ends with a sign meaning perhaps to establish, to become, or to bring forth. The subject is gone. Who acted? The question has no secure answer. A god may have spoken, a goddess may have shaped, a natural condition may have transformed without any divine will. Each possibility creates a different beginning. The fragment permits all three. Scholars continue to debate whether missing portions should be reconstructed through parallel texts. One school of thought favours cautious restoration when similar phrases appear elsewhere. Another warns that familiar formulas can tempt translators into creating the expected sentence. The open question remains difficult because ancient scribes repeated patterns while also changing them. A parallel can guide, it can also mislead. Suppose that another tablet says that a god separated heaven and earth. A broken text contains only the words separated and traces of a divine sign. The reconstruction seems obvious. Yet the lost subject might have been a goddess, a group, or an unnamed force. Likelihood is not proof. Careful additions mark uncertainty through brackets, question marks, and notes. These symbols protect the reader from false confidence. They also interrupt the smoothness of the story. A bedtime mystery prefers flowing certainty. The tablet refuses it. You may find this refusal strangely honest. The ancient world does not owe modern listeners a complete revelation. Its chaos is not a puzzle designed for eventual solution. Some pieces are simply gone. The same is true of human memory. A family preserves one ancestor's name and forgets another. A city remembers a victory and misplaces the lives of those who repaired its walls. Records favour events that institutions consider worthy. Ordinary experience disappears quietly. The earliest theology may have suffered the same fate. A hymn to a major god receives repeated copies. A local account of what existed before the gods receives one. The grand tradition survives. The unusual one becomes dust. A council decree proves that ancient institutions could control which texts, rituals, and personnel received support. Temples employed scribes and maintained ceremonial knowledge. Resources shaped remembrance. A composition preserved within a wealthy centre had advantages that no obscure village tradition could match. Authority determined what was copied. Copying influenced what became ancient truth. This does not mean the surviving tradition is false, it means it is incomplete. The difference matters. You walk through a ruined archive in your imagination. Clay fragments lie beneath collapsed brick. Some carry numbers. Some preserve divine names. One fragment contains half of a prayer spoken by someone whose voice is otherwise lost. You kneel beside it. The words stop at the break. No conclusion follows. The silence feels personal. Archaeologists often recover thousands of fragments from one site. Classification can require decades. Some pieces remain unpublished in storerooms because too few specialists and too many tablets stand between discovery and study. A fragment may already contain an important line while no living reader has yet recognized it. That possibility is real. though it should not become fantasy. The lost answer may still exist. It may also be gone forever. Both possibilities remain open. Prestigious research institutions continue digitizing collections, improving photography, and comparing handwriting across museums. New joins can emerge when scholars recognize that fragments belong together. Technology makes old clay visible in fresh ways. Light from different angles reveals shallow wedges. Digital models capture surface depth. Databases allow distant collections to be compared. The silence sometimes narrows. It never disappears completely. A newly joined piece may restore 3 words and create 2 new questions. A divine name returns, but the action remains missing. The beginning becomes clearer and stranger at once. This pattern defines historical research. Answers expand the field of uncertainty. You notice a tiny blank space between 2 preserved lines. It may be ordinary spacing, or it may mark a damaged sign worn smooth. The difference cannot be confirmed. Such small uncertainties gather until an entire cosmology begins to flicker. Perhaps there was a being older than the divine generations. Perhaps the text described only an undivided world. Perhaps later readers have made the phrase more mysterious than the scribe intended. The honest position remains suspended between these choices. No final verdict arrives. The tablet rests under its lamp, patient and incomplete. Its broken corner holds no glow, no whisper, and no secret voice waiting to be released. It holds absence. Yet that absence shapes every interpretation around it. The missing lines prevent the story from closing. They preserve uncertainty at the heart of creation, where the oldest words might once have stood. You draw back slowly. The crack remains. The silence remains. And the unanswered beginning becomes more enduring than any confident reconstruction. A pattern begins to emerge across the scattered clay. Not one story, Hamor, but several. Not one divine family pool, but generations arranged by rank, labour, place, and purpose. The fragments do not form a perfect system, yet they repeatedly suggest that creation followed an inherited structure. The world seems organised through cycles. Powers appear, duties are assigned, work is transferred. Cities rise, kingship moves, disaster interrupts, order returns under new names. You feel the pattern before you fully understand it. It resembles the repeated design pressed around a cylinder seal. One image follows another, circling back toward its beginning. The sequence continues as long as the seal rolls. Ancient Mesopotamian scribes preserved lists of gods, rulers, cities, professions, offerings, stars, animals, and ritual duties. Each list placed individual things inside a larger arrangement. A name rarely stood alone. It belonged above, below, beside, or beneath another name. Rank gave meaning, relationship gave identity. The divine world therefore resembled a structure already old when scribes began describing it. No single author appears to have invented the entire arrangement. Traditions accumulated across centuries, joining local gods with wider genealogies and political systems. One city contributed a sacred mother, another elevated a storm power, another guarded traditions of deep water and wisdom. The larger system absorbed them all. It did not absorb them neatly. That imperfection may reveal its true age. Invented systems often seek consistency. Inherited systems carry scars, exceptions, repeated titles, and figures whose original purposes have become unclear. Ancient religion behaves like an old house. New rooms are added. Doors are sealed. A staircase leads nowhere because the upper floor disappeared generations ago. Still, everyone insists the building has always looked this way. Researchers from Oxford University, Yale University, and the University of Chicago have studied divine lists to trace these layers. Their work shows that theological ordering changed with language, political power, and scribal tradition. A god could rise through the ranks. Another could become an attendant. A third might survive only as an ancestor listed before more active powers. The structure remained flexible because society remained unstable. Cities fought, traded, merged, and fell. Dynasties claimed ancient legitimacy. Conquerors adopted local gods to secure obedience. So the sacred hierarchy adjusted, yet it adjusted while pretending continuity. That is one of the oldest political skills. You walk through an imagined hall whose walls are covered with tablets. Each shelf represents a different category of existence. One holds sky gods, another holds worth, power, another records beings linked with illness, dreams, childbirth, grain, justice, and the dead. Farther inside, a narrow shelf preserves names no ritual still uses. They remain because scribes continue copying them. A name can outlive belief. The idea feels unsettling. Worship may fade, but classification preserves the outline of what once mattered. A forgotten god remains in a list like a dry seed stored inside clay. No prayer reaches it. No offering feeds it. Still, the name waits. A mainstream historical fact, it confirms that Sumerian remained a learned language long after ordinary people stopped speaking it daily. Babylonian and Assyrian scholars studied old vocabulary, copied hymns, and preserved bilingual lists. The dead language became a key to sacred authority. Ancient words carried prestige because they seemed closer to origins. A ritual spoken in old language appeared more powerful, even when many listeners could not understand every line. Mystery benefited from grammar. You imagine a priest reciting words inherited from teachers who inherited them from earlier teachers. His pronunciation may differ from the original sound. His explanation may reflect later theology. Yet the ritual continues because continuity itself creates confidence. The words have always been spoken. Therefore, they should be spoken again. Repetition becomes proof. This pattern extends beyond language. Creation, kingship, temple service, seasonal ritual, and royal rebuilding all depend upon restoration. A king rarely claims to invent order completely. He claims to renew it. He repairs the ancient wall. He reopens the canal. He restores the neglected shrine in Terulen. He returns the world to its proper condition. Power presents itself as memory. A council decree from Mesopotamian history often justifies action through established custom. Divine command, or inherited right, change is framed as recovery. The new ruler becomes guardian of something older than himself. This protects authority from appearing temporary. If the system existed before the king, resistance appears not merely political, but unnatural. The same logic shapes cosmic stories. The gods do not create every law spontaneously. They receive domains, inherit roles, and govern powers already associated with particular places. Authority enters an existing framework. Even divine kingship needs precedent. You hear the faint turning of a potter's wheel. Clay circles beneath steady hands. The motion repeats. Each rotation returns the same surface while changing the vessel slightly. A wall rises through repetition, not through one sudden act. The cosmic system may have grown similarly. Each generation retold the pattern. Each city pressed its own mark. Each empire widened the vessel. The finished shape never truly became final. A quirky modern theory claims that repeated Mesopotamian cycles describe forgotten global civilizations destroyed and rebuilt many times. The texts do contain floods, transferred kingship, divine conflict, and renewed cities. Yet they do not provide reliable evidence for technologically advanced lost worlds. Their cycles are better understood through social memory, environmental danger, political collapse, and ritual renewal. The ordinary explanation is no less dramatic. Mesopotamian communities repeatedly watched cities fall. Canals failed. Dynasties vanished. Temples burned. Populations moved. Then someone rebuilt upon the ruins. History itself looks cyclical. The gods could therefore be imagined through the same rhythm. One generation rises, another receives power, and an older order retreats into memory. Creation is not one event. It becomes a process of arrangement and rearrangement. This raises an open scholarly debate. Some historians see a coherent theological system behind these traditions. Others argue that modern readers create unity by combining texts never intended to fit together. The disagreement remains important. A divine list may reflect scholarly classification. A hymn may express local devotion. A myth may serve a ritual or political aims. Placing them into one perfect sequence can erase their differences. Yet repeated patterns still deserve attention. Generations matter. Labour matters. Naming matters. Cities matter. Authority moves through recognisable stages. The system may not have been one formal doctrine, but it was more than random storytelling. It was a shared way of imagining order. You notice how often the universe resembles a household. Great gods stand like senior family members. Younger beings receive duties, servants maintain daily needs. Property, rank, food, conflict, and inheritance shape the sacred world. The household becomes a model for creation. Then creation becomes a model for the household. The circle closes. No one can easily say which came first. Perhaps human society projected itself onto the heavens. Perhaps sacred traditions gave social hierarchy a cosmic explanation. More likely, each reshaped the other across generations. People built temples as divine houses. Then they organized earthly institutions in the image of those temples. The system became self-confirming. A ruler governs because the gods govern. The gods govern because the universe requires rank. The universe requires rank because society cannot imagine order without it. The reasoning turns like the seal. A soft scraping sound moves through the tablet hall. A scribe is copying an ancient list onto fresh clay. He reaches a damaged... The sign is uncertain. He chooses one reading and continues. That choice enters the new copy. Centuries later, another scribe follows it. A moment of uncertainty becomes tradition. This is how systems grow, not only through grand revelation, but through small decisions preserved repeatedly. A spelling becomes a title. A title becomes a genealogy. A genealogy becomes sacred history. The process is slow enough to appear eternal. You pass shelves devoted to divine groups. Some traditions organize gods into councils or assemblies. Decisions emerge collectively, though power remains unequal. A great deity may preside. Others advise, witness, approve, or carry out commands. The divine assembly resembles an earthly council enlarged beyond human scale. Order requires consultation. It also requires someone whose decision becomes final. The system contains both cooperation and hierarchy. This balance helped explain political life. Ancient cities included rulers, elders, officials, temples authorities, and assemblies with varying influence. No single model governed every period. The gods preserved similar complexity. A decree could emerge from council. A command could still bear one powerful name. Records confirm that divine decisions were often imagined as fixed destinies assigned to beings, places, or institutions. These destinies defined proper function. A river should flow, a king should judge, a priest should serve, a field should produce. Disorder appears when something leaves its appointed role. The system therefore values stability, yet myth repeatedly shows instability. Gods rebel, humans complain. Cities fall, floods erase boundaries. The tension keeps the structure alive. Perfect order would produce no story. Complete chaos would produce no memory. Mesopotamian imagination rests between them, where order is always necessary and never secure. Perhaps this is the hidden system being reconstructed from the fragments. Not a secret machine, not a lost scientific diagram. A repeated vision of reality as labour, hierarchy. Inheritance, crisis, and renewal. The gods fit inside it. Humanity fits beneath them. Cities translate it into brick. Scribes preserve it in clay. You stand at the centre of the imagined archive as every shelf fades into shadow. The individual stories no longer feel isolated. They form a rhythm. Birth leads to rank. Rank creates duty produces labour. Labour creates resentment. Resentment forces change. Change becomes a new order. The cycle does not end. It settles briefly. Then the seal turns once more. Perhaps the oldest truth preserved by the tablets is not the name of one forgotten being. Perhaps it is the structure itself, older than any single god and flexible enough to survive every new ruler. The system continues because each generation believes it's restoring what came before. A single oil lamp burns inside the scribal room. Its flame bends whenever someone opens the door, sending a thin trail of wax smoke across the low ceiling. Shelves line the walls, crowded with clay tablets wrapped in cloth, stacked in baskets, or laid flat beneath labels. Not everything here will survive. The scribes know this, even if they do not speak of it. Clay can endure for ages, but only when someone chooses to shape it, inscribe it, dry it, store it, and sometimes copy it again. Memory begins as selection. One composition receives fresh clay, another remains unnatural. A third is broken and discarded because no teacher considers it useful. The future is decided quietly. You sit beside a senior scribe whose fingers are stained with damp earth. He studies an older tablet resting across his knees. Its signs are difficult, its language already remote, and one edge has crumbled away. He does not copy everything. He pauses over a line, adjusts the wording, and presses a cleaner version into new clay. Perhaps he is correcting an error. Perhaps he's changing the tradition. No one can know. Ancient scribal culture preserved an enormous range of material, including contracts, hymns, omens, medical recipes, legal judgments, royal praise, school exercises, and lists of words. Yet survival was never equal. Administrative tablets appeared in vast numbers because institutions produced them constantly. A temple could record livestock, grain, beer, wool, land, labour, and offerings every day. Myths required different reasons to be copied. A story might belong to education, ritual, royal ideology, or scholarly curiosity. Without one of those purposes, it could disappear. Prestigious researchers at Yale University, Oxford University, and the University of Pennsylvania have shown how ancient schools shaped the literary record. Students copied selected compositions repeatedly as part of their training. Those school texts gained many chances to survive. Other stories may have existed mainly through oral performance and left little clay behind. The surviving canon therefore reflects classrooms as much as temples. This is easy to forget. A modern reader may treat every recovered myth as a sacred text widely known across the ancient world. In reality, some compositions may have belonged mainly to educated circles. A farmer might never hear them. A temple singer might know another version. A grandmother might tell a household story no scribe considered worthy of clay. The ancient world contained more memory than writing. Most of it vanished. You hear students reciting signs in the courtyard. Their voices rise and fall together, uneven but determined. One boy forgets a line, another smirks until the teacher turns. The lesson concerns divine genealogy. The students experience it as homework. That contrast shapes what reaches you. A tale survives because someone assigned it. A sacred mystery crosses 4,000 years because several tired students copied it badly enough to leave multiple versions. History depends upon unexpected devotion. The senior scribe reaches for a smoother tablet. He chooses a hymn praising a powerful god whose temple still controls land and labour. That choice is practical. A living institution supports living memory. The god receives offerings, festivals, musicians, priests, and scribes. His texts remain useful. His titles appear in ceremonies. His ancient deeds justify current authority. An obscure deity without a functioning temple possesses fewer protectors. Silence gathers around forgotten gods. Their names may remain in lists, but their stories fade. A mainstream historical fact appears across Mesopotamian archives. Political change affected which cities, rulers, and divine figures received emphasis. When a capital rose, its patron god gained new hymns, expanded titles, and greater placement within divine hierarchies. When a city declined, its traditions could lose support. The sacred record followed power, not perfectly, not immediately, but steadily. A king who rebuilt a temple might order old inscriptions copied or restored. He could present himself as heir to earlier rulers, even when conquest separated their dynasties. The past became useful. Ancient prestige strengthened present authority. Scribes helped perform this transformation. They searched for old name. They copied foundation texts. They revived titles that made a new king appear ancient. Memory served to hear the legitimacy. You move into a storage chamber where broken tablets fill large jars. Some fragments preserve legal phrases, others carry only half a divine name. A worker sorts them by shape and subject. One piece is reused as packing material. Another is selected for study. The decisions seem ordinary. They are not. Each choice alters the future archive. A curious fringe claim suggests that scribes concealed dangerous knowledge by hiding selected tablets from public view. Direct evidence for a secret program of suppression remains scarce. The more likely process was mundane. Text disappeared through neglect, changing taste, political collapse, and limited resources. Forgetting rarely requires a conspiracy. It requires only indifference. That may be more unsettling. A banned text attracts attention. An ignored text simply dies. You imagine a composition describing a sacred power older than the familiar gods. It survives in one temple school for several generations. Then the curriculum changes. Teachers prefer newer hymns. The old tablet remains in a basket until its signs soften under damp air. Eventually the room is rebuilt. The tablet becomes filled beneath a floor. Its story ends beneath footsteps. No priest destroys it. No ruler fears it. No ruler fears it. The text disappears because nobody copies it. An open scholarly debate concerns whether Mesopotamian scribes thought of themselves as authors, editors, or guardians of inherited tradition. Some composition name no creator. Others attach works to famous figures or legendary sages. A scribe might claim merely to preserve ancient words while quietly reshaping them. The boundary between copying and composing remained flexible. A changed phrase could clarify old grammar. It could also redirect theology. The senior scribe beside you smooths one sign with his thumb. He replaces an obscure term with a familiar one. The new copy becomes easier to read. It also becomes less ancient. Preservation not always changes what it says. This truth extends beyond language. When scribes arranged god lists, they imposed order upon competing traditions. When they connected one deity with another, they created relationships that later readers accepted as old. When they placed one city first in a sequence, they shaped historical memory. Classification became creation. The scribes did not invent the gods from nothing. They organized the way later generations remembered them. You hear reeds scratch at clay throughout the room. Each stylus leaves a different pressure. Some signs are elegant and narrow, others are broad, hurried, and crowded. Handwriting reveals temperament. One scribe is patient, another is tired. A third writes as though the tablet owes him money. These human differences enter sacred preservation. A careful copy may become authoritative. A sloppy copy may create a puzzle. A teacher's correction may survive beside the student's mistake, leaving modern scholars to decide which one reflects the intended line. The clay remembers both confidence and hesitation. A council decree proves how deeply writing could bind institutions. Land transfers, labour obligations, temple privileges, and royal commands gained force through formal recording. Literature possessed another kind of power. It shaped identity. A city heard its god praised. A dynasty heard its legitimacy confirmed. A student learned where humanity belonged within the cosmic order. The act of copying reinforced the world described them. To preserve a story was to preserve a structure. This may explain why creation traditions mattered even when they offered no single, complete sequence. They taught that order had sacred ancestry. They explained why gods held rank. They explained why humans worked. They explained why temples, cities, and kings appeared necessary. A story about the beginning justified the present. Yet scribes also preserved unsettling fragments that complicated authority. They copied divine rebellions, failed rulers, devastated cities, and laments accusing the gods of abandonment. The record was not simple praise. It carried doubt. Why preserve doubt? Perhaps sacred tradition required honesty about catastrophe. A city destroyed by war could not pretend order had never failed. Laments gave grief a ritual form. Myths gave conflict a cosmic place. The scribes preserved instability because everyone lived with it. A polished theology without disaster would have felt false. You notice a tablet describing a fallen city. Its lines speak of empty streets, abandoned homes, and silence where music once sounded. Nearby rests a hymn praising eternal kingship. Both occupy the same shelf. The contradiction is deliberate. Authority claims permanence. History disproves it. The scribal archive holds both truths together. Prestigious research organizations studying temple schools have noted that scribes were often trained within elite institutions. Their perspective naturally favored rulers, temples, officials, and established order. Ordinary laborers appear mostly through rations, debts, lawsuits, and assigned tasks. Their inner lives rarely reach the tablet. The archive speaks loudly for institutions. It whispers for everyone else. Still whispers survival. A personal letter reveals anxiety. A school text reveals embarrassment. A legal complaint reveals anger. A prayer reveals fear inside a household. These small texts disturb the ground system by showing individuals living beneath it. The cosmic order may be majestic. The person still worries about illness, hunger, and an unanswered message. The senior scribe places the finished copy beside the lamp. Its surface shines with moisture. He reads the final lines aloud. The words describe ancient beings, hidden waters, and the ordering of divine powers. His voice gives them life for one more evening. Then he sets the tablet aside to dry. He cannot know who will read it. Perhaps a student. Tomorrow. Perhaps no one for centuries. Perhaps you. The room grows darker as the oil runs low. Shelves fade into shadow. Thousands of tablets wait silently, each representing a choice once made. This king mattered. That god deserved praise. This ritual required preservation. That old story remained useful. The archive is not the ancient world. It is the portion someone decided to keep. You feel the weight of everything missing around it. Unwritten songs. Discarded myths. Forgotten goddesses. Household prayers spoken only once, stories carried by boatmen, shepherds, brewers, mothers, and soldiers. Their voices vanish without clay. The scribes preserved wonders, but they also created silence through every choice. Perhaps the oldest hidden truth is not concealed inside one forbidden tablet. Perhaps it lies in the immense space around the surviving record. What endured was selected. What vanished may once have been equally sacred. The lamp flickers, the final tablet dries, and somewhere beyond the scribal room, an untold story disappears without leaving even a broken edge. Night settles over the ancient plain with almost no movement. The last heat leaves the earth slowly, rising from the clay in faint waves. Reeds stand motionless beside dark water. Far beyond them, ruined walls soften beneath starlight until city and landscape appear, woven from the same shadow. You carry no lamp now. The tablet rests inside your memory. Its damaged signs no longer resemble a complete message. They appear as fragments of a larger silence, each one preserving a moment when human beings tried to imagine existence beyond every familiar beginning. The question remains simple. What existed before the gods? The possible answers gather without settling. There may have been water without shores, earth without fields, darkness without night, or a maternal presence without a fixed name. That there may have been joined realms awaiting separation. There may have been no single answer. Sumerian sacred literature did not emerge from one author, one city, or one theological council. It developed through generations of temple life, local traditions, political change, oral memory, and scribal education. Different communities inherited different beginnings. A priest beside the marsh understood creation through water. A farmer understood it through fertile earth. A ruler imagined authority descending from heaven. A labourer may have heard only that even gods once carried baskets. The oldest tablet becomes unsettling because it does not place the familiar gods at the absolute beginning. They emerge within a sequence. They inherit relationships and domains, responsibilities, and conflicts. Existence seems to wait for them. This does not diminish their importance within the ancient world. The gods still govern storms, fertility, justice, cities, illness, love, and death. Their temples dominate urban life, yet their power operates inside something older. A structure appears to precede the rulers who later maintain it. Perhaps that structure is merely poetic. Perhaps it reflects the Sumerian habit of seeing order through households, offices, labour groups, an inherited rank. Every person belonged somewhere within a network of obligation. The divine world followed the same design. Older powers produced younger ones, younger gods received duties, lesser beings performed work. Humanity entered as a new labouring class. The system continued because every level supported another. Researchers at Oxford University, Yale University, and the University of Pennsylvania have traced these patterns through myths, hymns, lists, and administrative records. Their studies reveal no secret universal doctrine hidden behind every tablet. Instead, they reveal a culture thinking through many voices. That complexity deserves patience. Modern readers often search ancient writing for one dramatic revelation. They want a forgotten creator, an advanced civilization, or a forbidden history suppressed by later authorities. The clay offers something quieter. It offers uncertainty shaped by evidence. A wedge can support several readings. A missing sign can change the subject of a sentence. A later copy can preserve an older tradition while reshaping its meaning. The mystery grows through limitation. You walk across the dark plain toward a low rise. Broken bricks lie beneath your feet, their edges softened by centuries of wind and rain. One brick once belonged to a temple wall. Another formed a part of a house. Nothing now identifies which was sacred. The distinction has returned to earth. This is the fate of every city built from mud brick. Walls collapse, roofs sink, streets fill, new inhabitants build over old rooms, until entire neighbourhoods become layers beneath a mound. Civilization becomes geology. The gods may remain in hymns, but their houses become soil. A mainstream historical fact confirms that many ancient Mesopotamian sites contain long sequences of rebuilding. Temples and homes rose repeatedly upon earlier foundations. The ground itself became an archive. Every layer preserved a different arrangement of rooms, streets, ovens, graves, and sacred spaces. Excavation reveals these layers in reverse order, moving downward through time. To discover the beginning, archaeologists must descend. The image feels appropriate. The oldest truth is rarely waiting on the surface. You pause beside a fragment of wall. Its plaster retains a faint trace of colour, nearly invisible beneath moonlight. Someone once renewed this surface. Someone carried water, mix clay, smooth the wall, and step back to examine the work. That person remains unnamed. The ruler who claimed the building may survive in an inscription. The labourer survives only through the wall itself. History often remembers command more clearly than effort. The creation stories preserve the same imbalance. Great gods issue decrees, lesser beings perform tasks, humanity inherits the burden. Order is described from above. Life is experience. Tis and below. A quirky tradition imagines ancient sages emerging from deep water to teach civilization. Later writers described wise beings who brought knowledge of writing, building, agriculture, and ritual. Some modern theories transform them into visitors from distant worlds. The surviving evidence does not require that conclusion. Water already represented hidden wisdom, unexplored depth, and the source of useful life. A teacher rising from it fits the sacred landscape naturally. Still, the image remains haunting. Knowledge comes from somewhere beyond the city. It enters human hands, then its source disappears beneath the surface. Perhaps every invention feels like that. A thought arrives without revealing its complete origin. A person shapes it, teaches it, and passes it onward. Eventually, no one remembers the first mind that held it. The idea becomes ancient. An open scholarly debate continues over how early Mesopotamian communities understood their creation tradition. Some historians emphasize ritual performance, others examine political symbolism, environmental memory, or scribal classification. No single interpretation explains every fragment. That uncertainty should remain visible. The past becomes less truthful and polished into a perfect system. You look upward. The stars appear sharply over the plain, scattered in depth no ancient observer could measure. Sumerian and Babylonian scholars watched such skies carefully, recording celestial movements and interpreting unusual events. They searched for order above, because life below remained uncertain. A steady star offered reassurance. An eclipse offered warning. The heavens became a second archive, written in light rather than clay. Yet even the stars did not answer what came first. They belonged to an ordered sky already separated from Earth. Their paths assumed space, time, and direction. The deepest beginning remained beyond observation. Only imagination could enter it. That imagination did not create a blank void. It created layers of presence. Water stirred beneath visible ground. Darkness held unrealized form. Sacred generations arose through relationships. The world became organized rather than suddenly manufactured. Perhaps this is the hidden truth behind the oldest tablet. Creation may not have been understood as one instant. It may have been understood as the gradual arrival of distinction. One thing separates from another. One power receives a name. One being gains a G. One place becomes sacred. One body begins to work. Existence acquires meaning through relationship. This process never truly ends. A city remains a city only while people maintain its walls, canals, markets, homes, and a memory. A god remains present only while names are spoken. Rituals performed and stories copied. Order survives through attention. Neglect returns everything towards silence. The thought feels slightly unsettling because it applies beyond ancient Mesopotamia. Modern institutions also appear permanent while depending upon ordinary acts repeated every day. Records must be kept, buildings must be repaired, children must be taught, memory must be renewed. Civilization rests upon maintenance. The old labouring gods would recognize the arrangement immediately. You reach the highest point of the ruined mound. From here, the Darkland extends toward the unseen marshes. No temple tower interrupts the horizon. No royal procession crosses the plain. The ancient cities have entered another kind of existence. Scattered through museums, excavation reports, translated lines, and the imagination of those willing to listen. Their silence is not complete. Clay continues to speak, though never in one voice. The oldest tablet does not reveal a final being standing before all gods. It does not provide a simple genealogy reaching toward absolute origins. It offers something more elusive. It suggests that the divine order had a beginning. It suggests that structure, matter, or possibility may have preceded familiar authority. It suggests that even gods entered a world carrying older conditions. Perhaps that the sacred beings were never the first inhabitants of existence. Perhaps they were its first organizers. The distinction changes the story gently, but completely. A creator standing outside everything is different from a ruler emerging inside an ancient system. One begins the timeline, the other inherits it. The Sumerian fragments lean toward inheritance. Not always, not clearly, but often enough to leave the question open. You stand beneath the stars as a cool wind moves across the mound. Dust passes over broken bricks, filling shallow impressions left by vanished walls. The ruins lose their sharpness. The plain becomes quiet again. Somewhere beneath your feet, another fragment may remain unread. It may contain a familiar prayer and an ordinary grain account, or several signs that alter the oldest creation sequence. No one can promise revelation. That is what makes the possibility honest. The story remains unfinished because the evidence remains unfinished. New discoveries may clarify one line while deepening another mystery. Ancient truth rarely returns whole. It arrives in pieces. You carry those pieces without forcing them together. Water, darkness, earth, sacred birth, divine labour, human service, cities, kingship, and stance remain beside one another. They form no perfect answer. They form a landscape. Within that landscape, the gods appear gradually but receive names, establish households, and depend upon mortal hands. Humanity appears fragile, burdened, and unexpectedly creative. The tablet rests between them, preserving a beginning neither side fully controls. Perhaps this is why the oldest question continues to breathe. Not because the answer has been hidden by someone powerful, but because the beginning itself may never have been simple. Perhaps there was no single moment where nothing became everything. Perhaps existence unfolded through layers, each one older than the order built upon it. And perhaps the first layer remains beyond every surviving name. The night around you becomes softer now. The ruined mound no longer feels empty. It rests beneath the stars like an old body finally released from labour. Wind passes gently across the broken bricks, smoothing dust into every hollow. You do not need to solve the tablet. Its uncertainty can remain beside you without demanding an answer. The water may stay dark, the oldest name may stay missing. The gods may remain suspended within a timeline whose first moment no scribe could preserve. Let the question grow quiet. Picture the marshes beneath moonlight, silver at their edges and black within their depths. Reeds bend slowly. A distant bird settles upon the water. No temple drum sounds across the plain. The cities sleep beneath the earth. Their kings no longer command. Their workers no longer carry baskets. Their scribes no longer press signs into wet clay. Everything has returned to stillness. Yet one small tablet continues its patient journey through time. It asks nothing from you. It offers no command, no warning, and no final revelation. It simply remains. You may allow your thoughts to rest beside it, where broken signs meet gentle shadow. There is no need to rebuild the missing lines tonight. Perhaps the oldest world was water. Perhaps it was darkness. Perhaps it was a quiet presence without a face or title. Whatever existed there has waited through ages without explanation. It can wait a little longer. Your breathing slows. The ancient plain fades. The stars remain above the silent earth, steady and distant, while the first mysteries settle beneath them like silt beneath calm water. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. Good night.